Chapter 964. Stop him. Malfurion let out a desperate roar. Once the power of the World Tree is absorbed, it will reverse and release Breath of Destruction. Weaken him, or we won't be able to use our last resort. The great druid didn't have time to explain what Breath of Destruction was, but it didn't sound like anything good. Far away, all the lesser elves on Mount Hyjal and even the surrounding areas were alarmed. Gorgeous light balls began to fly toward the World Tree at high speed. Those light balls were the most basic unit of the Night Elves, lesser elves. They were the craftsmen of the Night Elves who could help the elves collect wood and other resources. At the same time, they were also the final form of the Night Elves after their souls returned to the earth. There was no time to investigate the legend of the lesser elves. However, what was certain was that if Archimonde's vitality did not fall below the lower limit, these lesser elves in soul form would only be courting death if they rushed over and self-destructed. They would probably be forced to fall in an instant and then be made into materials for soul retribution. Stop him. Mograine slashed out with Ashbringer, for the last time. Then he knelt down on the ground, panting heavily. For an old soldier who was approaching the age of 60, he was no longer young. Ashbringer, which seemed to be infinitely powerful and could blast the Calamity soldiers into pieces, was a typical holy artifact. However, using such a powerful weapon also required physical strength and mental strength. After squeezing out all the strength in his body, he slashed out a brilliant golden crescent. This golden crescent slashed over, but Archimonde dodged it the moment before it hit. An incomparably thick right leg fell to the ground. However, Archimonde really didn't know what kind of talent he had. He was actually climbing up with 2 arms and 1 leg. Stop him. Turalyon also went all out. Quell, Zarim, burst out with a golden light like the sun, and the long beam of light directly penetrated Archimonde's back from behind, exploded from his chest, and even shot into the trunk of the World Tree. It looked like a golden spear had nailed Archimonde to it. However, in just 3 seconds Archerons continued to climb. His 3 limbs glowed with an evil black light as they clung to the bark of the World Tree and began to corrode the green bark of the World Tree at a high speed. What was even more frightening was that his severed right leg seemed to have started to grow a new, tender, and much smaller leg. Stop him. Tyron was sobbing uncontrollably. She ignored her right hand that was bleeding profusely, and continued to draw her bow and shoot arrows mechanically. Every long-range hero that could still attack chased after Archimonde in a frenzy. They desperately poured their firepower into Archimonde's back, who seemed to have lost all sense of pain. Even Gianna and the others had rushed back. But the effect was getting weaker and weaker. It was very simple. Melee professions could not wear heavy armor and climb a World Tree that seemed to require at least 1,000 people to hug. After losing the damage from the 2 strongest sacred swords, the entire team's attack power dropped by more than a level. Now they had almost reached the critical point. Although Archimonde's life force had dropped to a very dangerous level, as long as he absorbed a large amount of the power from the World Tree and successfully converted it into dark energy, he would be able to turn the tables. Not only would he be able to kill Duke and the others, but he would also be able to carry out his evil plan and kick all of Azeroth into the abyss of destruction. The tearful Tyron suddenly remembered that she still had one last sacred sword. She turned her head and stared at Duque. Duque, anything is fine. I beg you. Thrall realized that his side was starting to lose strength. After the 4th throw of the Hammer of Ruin, there was no hope of taking down Archimonde. He turned around and said, Duque, it's all up to you now. Ronan struggled to get up from the ground and howled. The destruction of Dalagen. Mograine shouted unwillingly. The fall of Lordaeron. Jaina flashed to Duque's side. Her fists were clenched and her fair skin was red with anger. Duque, the revenge of my father and brother. Servanas stabbed his longbow into the ground and shouted, the revenge of every Quell Dorii. Thousands of elite warriors who refused to retreat stared at Duque from afar. Thousands of elven souls stared at Duque. Countless forces, every one of them who had thrown themselves in front of the magic mirror, gritted their teeth and cheered for Duque and the rest. They were all staring at Duque. They were waiting. They were looking forward to it. They were sincerely longing for it. They were screaming in their hearts. They prayed that Duke Marcus, who was hailed as Azeroth's greatest hero in the last 1,000 years for them, for the whole world, would deal a fatal blow to the evil and terrifying existence. The commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. The feeling of being watched and looked forward to by billions of creatures made Duque's heart extremely heavy. Duque had long understood that he had to go all out. Only he, who also held a holy sword, could seriously injure Archimonde and create a chance for the elves to self-destruct. However, this could not be done by a clone. After all, a clone was a clone, and its strength could never exceed that of the main body. Someone who could kill Archimonde. The only possibility was for him to do it himself. No one knew what Archimonde's final killing move would be. No one could guarantee what the consequences of killing Archimonde would be. There were only two paths in front of Duque. Either he missed the opportunity and became the sinner of all of Azeroth, or he became a hero for 10 seconds. Duque smiled. He smiled casually. That bright and clear smile was aimed at Jaina, at Sylvanas, at every lover who was watching him silently from afar, and at everyone who trusted him and entrusted their last hope to him. I'm going. There was a soft sound. It was also a sound that seemed as light as a feather. But it made countless women fall in love with him. Duque's figure instantly turned into a stream of light, and when he appeared again, he was already under the tree. Grom, the same calm voice called out, allowing the orc god of war to completely understand what Duque was thinking about. The burly figure was the first to leap onto Kane's totem pole. Kane used the last of his strength to hit Grom high up into the air like a flying ball. That was the highest jump Grom Hellscream had ever made. Chapter 965. An arrow pierced through the clouds and an army of thousands came to meet. At this moment, Lord Howl was more than an army of thousands. That aura of choosing people to devour. That earth-shattering roar. That blood howl that turned the tide of the battle. All of them were Archimonde's death warrant. In order to deal with the long-range bombardment of the heroes, Axebody's resistance had already switched to a high magic resistance state. Grom's unexpected leap into the air caused Archimonde to panic. Gritting his teeth, Ak roared, "Hand of Death." In theory, the effective Hand of Death was to kill all targets within 30 meters. Unfortunately, Archimonde was too weak. He had been injured repeatedly, and most of his magic power had been diverted to the protective shield. Hand of Death, which was supposed to kill Grom instantly, landed on his chest with a loud bang. The orc god of war, who had extremely high HP, took the hit head-on. Then the scarlet long-handled axe drew a dazzling blood-red crescent in the air. The tip of the crescent was Archimonde's neck. With a scream, blood splattered everywhere. Half of Archimonde's neck was cut off from his body. If he were a mortal, he would have died hundreds of times, but he was a great demon of Eredar with extremely strong vitality. Even though the huge wound on his neck was like a fountain, he still didn't die. Scram. A large AoE air explosion blasted Grom's body into the ground like a meteor. He crashed into the thick black ground and created a huge crater. At this moment, Duque arrived. A simple long-range flash appeared on Archimonde's broad back. "Farewell, Archimonde." Duque's shouts spread in all directions. "Gone. It's over." There were so many people who covered for Duque's last attack, but Archimonde couldn't find any way to protect himself at the very end. He was in so much despair, so much hatred. If he had 10 more seconds, he could have completed the transformation of the World Tree's power, repaired his body, and won this easy final victory for him. However, it was at this crucial juncture that Duque arrived with the holy sword in hand. The golden light shone brightly, resplendent and glorious, with all the best wishes in the world of Azeroth. It was accompanied by the ethereal singing of holy children singing hymns in unison. Duque extended his left hand forward and pulled his right hand back. Like a drawn bow, he made a stabbing posture. The gears of time seemed to have rusted and solidified at this moment. Archimonde, who was at his wit's end, sent a wisp of divine sense to Duque. "Don't kill me. I only need the power of the World Tree. I swear I will not pollute this world. Otherwise, even if I die, I will give you the most terrible curse, polluting your soul so that you will never be able to become divine again. After you die, you will definitely degenerate into the ugliest demon." This was the deepest form of intimidation. It was also a threat that would definitely come true. The mysterious curse of a dying great demon was undoubtedly the most terrifying evil existence. Duque smiled. Archimonde was just stalling for time. How could he not know? He replied with a divine sense, "Just as I never dare to overestimate the moral integrity of a demon, I will also not underestimate my courage. Turns out, I'm also quite a brave person, although I was forced to at first." With a faint but determined smile, Duque stabbed the unknown holy sword in his hand into Archimonde's head like lightning. What came out of Archimonde's mouth was not only screams, but also a solid curse that was so thick that everyone could see it with the naked eye. If one ignored the black color that made people tremble, This huge curse was as long and magnificent as the Milky Way falling from the sky. Unfortunately, this incomparably illusory curse waterfall symbolized the ultimate evil of the world. It was the most violent destruction. It was the most terrible blasphemy. It was the deepest pollution. It was the strangest distortion. At this moment, everyone who looked at Duque with anticipation suddenly realized that they had forced Duque to make a terrible decision. No. Thousands of miles away, Queen Kalia, who saw this scene, fainted on the spot. Duque, Alicia's eyes were filled with tears. Nearby, Tyron's entire body was trembling, and she suddenly fell from the white tiger. Jaina suddenly felt all the strength in her body being sucked out, and she collapsed to the ground. Servana's face was pale, and he immediately knelt on the charred ground. Seeing this scene, Malfurion no longer felt like taking care of his allies. He raised his vine-like staff high up, and let out a long and complicated roar towards the sky. In the entire world, every little elf received his signal to attack. Hundreds of thousands of little elves drew colorful streams of light in the sky, and they all rushed towards Archimonde. Bang bang bang. Boom boom boom. At first there was only a series of firecracker-like sounds, but it soon turned into thunder, and then into the continuous roar of tens of thousands of cannons. It was completely unacceptable to people's hearing. Not only hearing but the terrifying strong light produced by the continuous crazy explosions, and even those who had their backs to the light source could still feel the unbearable strong light. Through the palms and arms that were covering their eyes, the strong light pierced through their muscles and skin, and pierced into their eyeballs. Ah! All kinds of screams, painful cries, endless screams. Every hero's senses were completely messed up. For a long time, no one knew how long it had been. Servanas finally opened his eyes. The huge world tree, Nordrassil, was like a lonely guard standing on a lonely land, and the crimson lightning that fell from the clouds outlined its outline. The heroes who had survived the terrible battle looked down at the battlefield that was nearing its end. In all directions, the few troops of various factions were retreating like a tide from the plateau on the top of Mount Hyjal through the teleportation portal. There were not many corpses. Perhaps the most eye-catching corpse was Archimonde, who was nailed to the trunk of the world tree. His huge corpse, which had recovered to its original height of 150 meters, was so eye-catching that it almost occupied the entire vision of the heroes. Accompanied by the crimson fireworks in the sky, looking around at the battlefield that was like a ruin, with debris and broken tiles everywhere, it was like a painting of the end of the world. Duque? Where's Duque? Jaina and Queen Xie exclaimed at the same time. Suddenly Ronan held a pitch-black body and shouted, "Teacher is here. He's still breathing. Let's leave first. The portal is already starting to become unstable." Chapter 966. Without any explanation, two strong arms picked up the two queens and plunged into the teleportation gate. The next moment, hundreds of miles away, the once huge and lush world tree's crown could be clearly seen shining brightly. After a violent tremor, the entire mountaintop exploded. Then, a terrifying shock wave and dazzling fire swept through the entire Mount Hyjal like a huge wave that could destroy the world. All signs of life were swept away by the wave of destruction at this moment. The night elves who had already taken refuge watched blankly as the home they had lived in for nearly 10,000 years was destroyed in this world-shaking explosion. Woo woo, woo woo woo. Countless elves knelt on the ground and prayed, wailing loudly. At the same time, in the wizard tower of Theramore Harbor, there was also a loud cry. "Damn it! I asked you to see if you could do anything, not to sacrifice yourself." Jaina knelt in front of the bed, tears streaming down her face. Servanas also knelt, his hands clasping the palm of the black figure on the bed. He pursed his lips tightly and did not say a word, his body trembling non-stop. The grief of the two queens was clearly expressed. In order to defeat Archimonde and his main force of the Burning Legion, the Alliance paid a heavy price. At this moment, in Theramore Harbor, almost every piece of green grass was neatly placed with corpses. Those who slept here were the familiar faces of the living who stood where they were in the past. Although each of them had written their wills and were prepared to accept their sacrifice before coming here, and this battle had ended in victory as well, proving that all their previous efforts were absolutely meaningful. But compared to such a victory, they would rather die in battle with their companions on Mount Hyjal, and not taste the suffocating despair that came from the Mage Tower. In order to kill Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion, their most respected hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, also suffered the most terrifying backlash when he killed this super big demon. An unknown and terrifying death curse had filled his entire body with the most evil and dark power. Since the invasion of the orcs, they did not enjoy many years of peace, and the Burning Legion also came. Everyone said that the test for Azeroth was yet to come. If they lost a powerful leader like Duque at this time, no one knew what would happen next. Would the alliance disband? Would the world come to the brink of destruction? All of the soldiers experienced the feeling of fear, worry, and helplessness towards the future after victory. It was as if they harbored a thirst for military achievements and hope in life, but were immediately seriously injured and on the verge of death as soon as they stepped onto the battlefield. They had no choice but to face the cruel reality of having their dreams shattered. It was a terrifying feeling, as if all future prospects were about to be destroyed. On top of the mage tower, Turalian, who was holding Quell Zerum tightly, had tears streaming down his face. Similarly, Mograine, who was holding Ashbringer by the window, had a similar expression on his face. As comrades who had worked with Duque for more than a decade, they knew better than anyone else how important Duque was in pushing the alliance forward. Not to mention that Duque had a close relationship with the Three Queens. In the current alliance, apart from Magni, there was not a single king from the previous generation left. In this political arena where political capital and achievements were the most important, there was no one who could replace Duque, not even temporarily. If they lost Duque here, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the alliance's politics, economy, and military. It might be better if Duque died in battle, but what they feared the most was that Duque would fall like Prince Arthas. That would be the nightmare of the alliance and even the entire world of Azeroth. A leader who understood the alliance and even the Horde the best, who had wisdom far above others, had fallen into the Burning Legion's sharpest claws. Just thinking about it made Turalian and Magni shiver. Looking at Duque, who was entangled by the dark aura and his body twitching, Jaina's tear-stained face looked as if she had been stabbed. She turned her head and questioned Benedict, Riadaline, and all the clerics. "Can't you do anything to find a way to get rid of the dark power in Duque's body?" None of the clerics dared to respond to Queen Kurtiraz's anger immediately. At this time, Queen Sylvanas pressed the back of Jaina's hand with one hand. "Enough. Didn't they say it before? It's useless to blame them. Duque's magic circuit is too fragile. This is the result of suddenly being invaded by dark power when Duque used up his magic power. Forcibly injecting external holy light will only cause every inch of Duque's magic circuit to collapse and explode." Could it be? Could it be? Jaina was about to lose control of her emotions. Are we just going to watch Duque die like this? Only silence answered her. At this time, Vanessa suddenly knocked on the door. Her face was also tear-stained. Several representatives of the Horde are outside Theramore. They want to see Master Marcus. Jaina was completely out of control. What are those cruel orcs doing here at this time? Do they want to see if Duque is dead and then take the opportunity to defeat the alliance? Mograine gently pressed on Jaina's shoulder and shook his head. "My old brother Theon once said, I've seen the dirtiest humans, but I've also seen the greatest orcs. So, glory has no borders." Jaina fell silent. Turalian nodded to Vanessa. "Let them come up." Not long after, Thrall, Grom, Wajin, Kane, and several other Horde leaders came up. Kane was too big, so he could only stay under the mage tower. The other three came up, holding a bouquet of flowers. Although the flowers did not match the burly and violent appearance of the orcs, everyone still felt a trace of warmth. Thrall spoke directly in the standard human language. "I know that we may not be welcome. But this time we have nothing to do with our position. It is purely to express our respect for a great hero. Perhaps one day the Alliance and the Horde will go to war again. Even so, I hope to see a healthy and powerful Duke Marcus on the battlefield, rather than hiding in a dark corner and rejoicing that a strong enemy has left." Thrall was so open and aboveboard that several paladins silently bowed slightly to Thrall to show their respect. Sylvanas and Jaina stood up together and also bowed to Thrall. Finally, it was Queen Sylvanas who spoke. "Thank you for your visit. This cooperation between the Alliance, the Horde, and the Night Elves was single-handedly facilitated by Duque on the Alliance's side. We also hope that we can finish what we started. Before there are new developments, we hope to maintain a state of peace with the Horde." Chapter 967. Duque felt very uncomfortable. His entire body was holding on. That terrible feeling was like forcing an ordinary person who liked to eat vegetarian food to participate in a eating contest and make him swallow 100 hot dogs in one go. What was worse was that it was an expired hot dog. The dark forces kept tearing at Duque's soul. They used all kinds of words and all kinds of scenes to tempt Duque. Destroy. Destroy. Destroy everything that you don't like. Possess. Occupy everything that you like the most. Countless thoughts attacked Duque's soul. They forced Duque to vent again and again, to release the negative emotions in the depths of his soul. Normally, if Duque was an ordinary native of Azeroth, unless he was a saint like Uther, he would have fallen long ago. Because the terrifying curse forced Duque to destroy 100 worlds, 1,000 castles and occupy 10,000 beauties. Fortunately, transmigrators had their own way of releasing pressure. It was a unique virtual space in Azeroth. Ah, I'm the master of my world. Duque laughed loudly as he created 100 worlds in SimCity. Then he summoned natural disasters, either flooding or burning them, destroying the 100 worlds. Just castles, be destroyed under my iron hooves. Duque laughed maniacally as he wantonly raided houses in Exile Conan, destroying the 1,000 castles that foreigners had painstakingly built. Teachers, submit to Duque's godly sword. Wah! Duque laughed sinisterly as he immersed himself in the 10-terabyte action movies that he had watched before. He wreaked havoc and fought with the teachers over and over again. After completing all the requirements, Duque suddenly woke up. His head was very heavy. His eyelids were very heavy. Even so, Duque still felt that his hands were tightly held by a pair of warm and soft hands. He's awake? He's really awake? Everyone be careful. The surroundings were in a state of chaos. Duque slowly opened his eyelids and saw two beautiful faces with tears in their eyes. Then the rest of the passers-by like Turalian and Thrall were all ignored by Duque. *CK. I actually changed from a European commander to an African chief. Duque said something that no one understood the moment he opened his mouth. Duque didn't expect anyone to understand his self-deprecating way of saying that he had fallen from a lucky star to an unlucky ghost. But I don't feel comfortable if I don't complain. For some reason, Duque's strange way of speaking made the holy knights at the side heave a sigh of relief. Holy light above, Duque, I truly admire you. You've been corrupted by the power of darkness, yet you're still able to maintain your consciousness. Mograine placed the large Ashbringer beside his hand. Turalian, on the other hand, was in a dilemma. His rationality told him to remain vigilant. After all, the fall could happen in an instant. Perhaps the fallen Duque still retained his cunning, and this was purely to numb people. What was interesting was that apart from him, everyone chose to believe that Duque had survived. Even the leaders of the tribe heaved a long sigh of relief. What? Duque is awake? Cain, who was more than 4 meters tall and had a huge body, actually shamelessly climbed up the stairs to the highest floor of the mage tower when he heard the commotion. He stuck half his head out of the door and kept looking. Duque, are you all right? The tear ducts of the two queens were too developed. Their tears flowed endlessly like a broken dam. How can I be all right? Wait a moment, let me see if I can examine myself. Duque sighed and summoned the system elf. Hey system elf, if you're not dead, let out a grunt. Duque was speechless. Help me examine my body? Host, I've already finished my examination. You're currently in a shadow form that can't be switched. Huh? Wait, wasn't I cursed? If you're talking about Archimonde's curse before he died, then it should be a very high priority and compulsive mental suggestion. By asking you to complete a specified depravity event, it will cause your mind to naturally distort. However, you've already completed all the compulsive requirements with the virtual reality simulation. Now, according to my assessment, your mental health is at 60%. So I've lost 40%. Duque secretly sighed. No, host, you've only lost 15% of your mental health because of the curse. By the way, before you came to Azeroth, the host's mental health index was 55%. Wait, something's wrong. Duque wanted to shut the system elf up, but it was too late. Before the host came to Azeroth, you were just a young man who failed many subjects and almost had to repeat a year in his first year. Then, your heart was filled with dissatisfaction with the status quo and a strong desire for the opposite sex. After you came to Azeroth, as the host's social status increased and you received love from the opposite sex, your mental health index peaked at 80%. Host, your mental health peaked at 80%. Before today's battle, it was 75%. It's dirty? Shut up. Duque's face darkened. Alright, he was completely black now, so he couldn't tell. The system elf obediently fell silent. After a while, Duque said, "Tell me the possible solution." The next moment, Duque's consciousness returned to reality. Duque said slowly, "Where's my holy sword?" "Here." Vanessa hurriedly handed over the slender holy sword. Looking at the once unknown holy sword, Duque was suddenly speechless. For some reason, most divine weapons in Azeroth had long human-like names, such as Azeroth's dual blades, or Hatish, the legendary staff of the Guardian. He had always been vexed. Why didn't his divine weapon have a name? Only later did he realize that divine weapons had to awaken their true names. According to the system elf, when you truly merged with the will of the divine weapon, the most realistic image in your mind and that name would automatically become the name of the new divine weapon. In the end, what did Duke, who had a sword in one hand and a staff in the other, think of when he killed Ak? Once upon a time, in the epic fantasy movie The Lord of the Rings, there was a powerful mage who did not know any spells at all. He only had the illuminating spell, and the rest of his talents were all dual-wield, berserk and other messy talent skills. He also held a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right, sweeping through thousands of orcs without panting. That's right, he was the famous white-robed sword sage Gandalf. In the end, the moment Duque killed Archimonde, he thought of Mr. Dry Tofu. Alright, something had happened. Duque picked up the slender holy sword sage and there were a few words written on it. Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword sage. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of ketchup. Chapter 968. This was not the first time Duque had wanted to change the name of his one and only divine weapon. In the end, this damned holy sword was like dried tofu, smelly and hard. It only recognized itself as dried tofu and ignored everything else. Alright, Duque gave in. If worst comes to worst, I'll just find a better divine weapon in the future and replace you. In the next second, when Duque silently recited the full name of the holy sword, everyone suddenly discovered that the long blade had turned into a translucent illusory form. This is... Servana's tear-stained face was full of astonishment. I have to do my best. I believe that light and darkness can be changed in this world. Since Arthas was able to fall from a glorious holy knight to the most evil death knight, I believe that I can also overcome the power of darkness in my body and change myself back to the side of light. Duque's sonorous and forceful words caused everyone in the room to freeze in shock and admiration. Duque faced the left. Turalyon, I know that you are the most rational of all of us. Now, I need you to be rational. So, please place Quell Zarim on my neck. If things go wrong, you can chop off my head. Turalyon's facial muscles kept twitching and trembling. He really wanted to curse at Duque for giving him such a cruel task. Even if they were once the best of comrades and friends, Turalyon still felt a deep pain when he had to personally play the double role of monitor and executioner. In the end, thousands of words turned into an incomparably heavy nod. Yes. On the other side, Servanas gently took out a dagger that she always carried with her. She placed the sharp blade against her throat. Duque, if you fail, I'll accompany you. Accompany you. These three words sounded soft, but they contained a deep love. Everyone in the room was visibly moved by his words. Without needing to say anything, Jaina condensed a similarly sharp icicle and calmly pressed it against her own throat. The two queens calmly smiled at Duque. The breeze that blew in from the window made their golden hair flutter, as if saying that as long as Duque could not turn the light in his body into the same color as their hair, then tragedy would be the only ending. Please move back to the wall. Everyone did as they were told. Everyone's gaze froze and even their hearts seemed to have stopped beating. Everyone held their breath and watched as Duque smiled faintly as he pierced his own chest with the divine sword, whose blade had already turned completely illusory. There was no splatter of blood. However, there was an even more intense reaction. It was like a drop of water in a pot of boiling oil. In an instant, Duque's entire body was boiling. What unfolded before the eyes of the powerhouses was definitely a wondrous scene. Duque's entire body seemed to have turned into a large fountain cluster. Countless dark forces as black as ink spurted out from the corners of Duque's eyes, nostrils, mouth, ear holes, and even the pores on his skin. However, each long line of black liquid was illusory and translucent. Even though the evil aura on it could be felt from a distance, this evil power did not dissipate in midair and pollute the surrounding air. Instead, like a spring, it stretched to its limit and automatically shrank back into Duque's body. Duque's mind was clear. He also knew that what he was about to do sounded ridiculous, but it was not without foundation. In terms of battle history, the original Ashbringer was filled with a legendary aura. It was first Mograine's weapon, then as Mograine was tricked by his son, the Ashbringer, also followed Mograine's soul and became the fallen Ashbringer. Finally, it jumped back to the side of light and became Tyrion Fordring's killing weapon, killing the Lich King Arthas. In terms of professions, there were also holy priests and shadow priests who could switch talents at will. On a larger scale, including planet Azeroth, the multiverse was made up of light and darkness. Therefore, light and darkness were only relative existences. There was no absolute boundary. Duque's mysterious and strange prayer echoed throughout the room. Light originates from darkness, and light emerges from darkness. Light originates from darkness, and light emerges from darkness. It was repeated over and over again like an infinite brainwashing cycle. Duque's performance, which was like a con man's, caused every witness to be dumbstruck and unable to control themselves. Yes, this was the incantation or line, chanted in the movie when Khadgar defeated Old Max and reversed the corrupted Karazhan energy pool in order to save the world. Strictly speaking, this was not a real incantation. Remember, the power of holy light and the power of darkness were classic idealistic powers. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, he believed it. That was enough. Just like the brainwashing song Little Apple, it was not pleasant at first, but after listening to it for a while, not only did it sound good, but it also made him feel that he really did not need to take his medicine today, and he felt cute. That was how Duque hypnotized himself. Now it seemed to be a little useful. The power of darkness around him was still roiling endlessly. But at this moment, anyone could be surprised to find that the condensed power of darkness seemed to be rolling slower and slower. Then the ink-like black seemed to be impure. It was mixed with a lot of strange light. At first it seemed to be dark gray, but gradually some people saw light gray, light white, pure white, and finally, there was a faint golden light like a dancing golden snake in the thick ink. The two queens, who had been holding a sharp blade to their throats, began to tremble involuntarily. They could not believe their eyes. Asterisk clang. Asterisk Queen Sylvie's dagger fell to the ground. The icicle in Jaina's hand also fell to the ground after losing the support of magic, turning into ice shards that no longer had any special meaning. In the room, every woman covered their mouth with their hands, afraid that they would scream and startle Duque, interrupting this epic-making process of whitewashing. Thrall and the others widened their eyes, and their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Not only did Old Bull widen his eyes, but even his nostrils rapidly expanded, and he panted heavily. Ronan was the smartest. Even though he was as excited as the others, he did not forget his original intention, and quickly put up a protective barrier, trying to block the outside world as much as possible. The golden light increased and became more and more intense. After a short 10 breaths, the golden light suddenly shone, and even outside the mage tower, a huge golden pillar of light shot into the sky. A golden Duque that seemed to be made of pure gold appeared in front of all the experts. Chapter 969. Turalian had long withdrawn the sword. Quill, Zarim, would never be able to deal with a truly virtuous person. If he dared to use such a holy sword to slash a saint, he would have to wait for the sword to shatter a second time. Thrall opened his mouth so wide that a cantaloupe could be stuffed inside. Grom's unscrupulous mouth even accidentally dripped saliva. It couldn't be helped. The beastman's fangs were too long, and it was easy for saliva to drip out. But no one was offended because most of them were just as unsightly. Vanessa was crying so hard that she looked like a cat with snot running out of her nose. Servanas and Jaina had unknowingly hugged each other. Their beautiful faces were tightly pressed together, and their tears were flowing together. It was impossible to tell whose tears they belonged to. In any case, all four eyes were fixed in Duke's direction, and they did not even blink, unwilling to miss out on any changes in the slightest. Even in the face of strong light, only Jaina used magic to create two black lenses in front of her eyes. When the dazzling golden light gradually faded, Duque pulled out the illusory holy sword from his chest again. His body turned from a 1,000-watt light bulb to the color of a normal person. At this time, almost all the powerhouses present heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Duque had escaped the fall. "Duque, are you all right?" The two queens asked in unison as they stretched out their hands. For jade-like hands seemed to be caressing Duque's body wantonly. It was as if they wanted to see if a certain part of Duque's body had demonized. Duque smiled bitterly and sighed. "Generally, I'm fine." This time, a long sigh of relief rang out in the large room. "Congratulations, Duque. I knew you could create miracles." If not for the two more noble queens in front, Mograine would have rushed up to give Duque a bear hug. "If possible, tell me how you returned from the darkness to the light." Actually, Duque didn't seem to know how to start, but he still chose to say it directly. "Alexandros, after all, that is the power of Archimond, the commander of the Burning Legion. It's not that easy to get rid of." This. Mograine was stunned. Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. Duque sighed. "I'd better demonstrate it for you." After saying that, Duque's palm glowed with a holy light. Benedict was stunned. Is this a healing spell? That's right. That's right. It was a healing spell. Although it was a low-level healing spell, Duque managed to cast a low-level healing spell in the next second. The holy radiance shone on Jaina's finger, and the long wound that was scratched by the sharp icicle began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. That's impossible. Duque, aren't you a mage? Kale, that was a little confused. Duque didn't say anything. This time he turned to cast his spell on Turalian. This was a more advanced, quick heal spell. The holy light fell on Turalian's head, and he could clearly feel that it was the purest holy light. He just didn't know why the holy light was golden in the air, but it turned green when it reached his head. Well, don't worry about these details. Everyone's attention fell on Duque. Near the gate, Mograine's adopted daughter, Sally Whitemane, had her hands crossed in front of her chest. She was a little excited and a little confused as she asked, "Lord Marcus has become a holy priest?" Duque smiled bitterly. If only it were that simple. What I'm going to do next is controllable. Please don't get excited and don't cut me. Someone swallowed. Duque transformed magnificently. In less than half a second, the holy radiance surrounding him faded away, turning into a dark color as deep as the night. At this moment, Duque became the first shadow priest in the history of Azeroth, or shadow priest for short. What he used was the shadow form of a shadow priest, which could increase shadow damage and weaken the physical damage he received. Duque, this is. Turalian was also stunned. Just like 15 years ago when the profession of warlock was first introduced to Azeroth. 10 years ago, many Dalajan wizards who couldn't continue on the path of wizards turned to warlocks who used dark power. I seem to have opened up a new talent for priests. Shadow? Turalian's face was full of embarrassment. How about it? Do you want to try the attack of a shadow priest? I'll be gentle. Curiosity killed the cat. Turalian seemed calm and rational, but he was also a curious and sharp person. Just like that, he held up his shield and his body burst with holy light. He said in a deep voice, "I'm ready." Duque slowly raised his arm, stretched out his index finger, and spat out 4 words. Mental lash. Since it was a mental attack, it naturally had nothing to do with physical defense. Similarly, it was not a direct dark power. The damage that came from the soul almost made Turalian jump in pain. Stop. Stop now. Duque smiled and stopped. Then, under everyone's gaze, he changed his talent again and became a holy priest. The crowd was speechless. Alright, now I have light and darkness coexisting in my body. Although the light is the absolute majority, I can't guarantee that I won't fall or something in the future. So, I'll take this opportunity to resign from the position of Alliance Commander. This is a good thing for me and the Alliance. The leaders of the Alliance instinctively wanted to persuade Duque not to do this, but after thinking about it carefully, they found that this was the best result. Before figuring out what a shadow priest was, no king would be at ease to hand over their army to a strong person who could use dark power, even if that person's name was Duke Marcus. The words that were about to come out of their mouths were all stuck in their throats. Only Jaina had a faint smile on her lips. Duque wasn't going to die in battle or fall completely. Even if he removed this title, would his influence on the Alliance fade? What a joke. 1 vote from each of the 3 queens was enough to influence any major decision in the Alliance. From Jaina's point of view, Duque's move to advance by retreating was extremely beautiful. Moreover, Duque had suffered because he wanted to kill Archimonde. If the hero who saved the world would be persecuted because of this, then there was no point in staying in the Alliance. If anyone dared to force Duque, Jaina was willing to bet that Kurtiras, Sindorii, and Rotterdam would definitely withdraw from the Alliance. Everyone was relieved that Duque was fine. At this moment, Duque smirked. Then, is it time to split the spoils of war? Chapter 970. Gianna elegantly took out 2 clean handkerchiefs and handed one to Servanas. She used the other to wipe away the tears on her face. Natural beauties were truly amazing. If she were a so-called internet celebrity from the previous dynasty, she would have become a ghost with a mess of foundation and makeup oil on her face. After wiping her face, Gianna was that flirtatious beauty again. Yes, Duque, are you going to share the spoils with us as a mage or a priest? Duque rolled his eyes at Gianna, a little speechless. Once she recovered, Gianna was back to being a smart and capable woman. Damn it. It would have been better if you didn't say it. Now that you've said it, how can I take the mage equipment and then the priest equipment? No. I'll spank the girls who don't listen later. Duque, who had almost fallen into depravity, said righteously, "I can clearly feel that my magic circuit is still functioning normally. Deep down, I'm still a mage and I think I'll definitely recover in the future. But now that holy power has completely dominated my body, I instinctively reject all elements other than holy light. So, I'll count myself as a priest for now." Duque voluntarily gave up his position as a mage, and Caponia could be seen secretly sighing in relief. There were so many strong people gathered this time, but the problem was that the classes of the strong people were quite clustered. Most of them were mages and warriors, but there was only one priest, Benedictus. There were 6 mages, and Duque, who was supposed to be the #1 hero and commander, was definitely going to take the best part of the pharaoh. Now, Duque suddenly jumped to the side of the few priests. This was definitely good news for the pharaoh. Unfortunately, Caponia's joy only lasted for a second, because she immediately realized that most heroes actually didn't care about this. That's right. Most heroes are just trying to save the world itself. Take Ronan for example. After the battle at Mount Hyjal, every mage looked at him differently. The old Ronan would always be the student of Marcus. The current Ronan was, without a doubt, the Arcana Master Ronan. Another example was her master, Kale, that's. Now that he had been cleansed of his reputation as a traitor and a despicable person, he could see former high elves saluting Kale, that's wherever he went. This change in status was a rare treasure that no amount of top-grade equipment could exchange for. Therefore, the spoils of war were only incidental. Of course, in this era where epic equipment had yet to appear in large numbers, everyone was happy to see such a large amount of high-quality equipment suddenly appear. Mograine said, "I know you're more concerned about this, Duke. The moment Archimonde was killed, I happened to grab the dimensional bag that fell out of his body while I was below him." Turalyon continued, "Her Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind was busy clearing up the battlefield and taking care of the aftermath. She had said to thank everyone for their support and that the Night Elves would not participate in the distribution of the spoils of war. However, there were 3 flash bow s among the spoils of war. We only had 2 rangers, so we gave one to Sir Whisperwind. The rest of the spoils of war are here." Turalyon opened the dimensional bag and filled half the room with all kinds of shiny top-grade equipment. This time, even Duque was a little surprised. He had never thought that Archimonde would have a mode of equipment explosion. Many of the equipment were not unique as he had imagined, but more like standard equipment. For example, the Windrunner sisters were not only playing with a flash bow, but also a feverish pursuit chainmail. Grom and Kane were also given a boundless fury leg armor, and the 2 macho men were overjoyed. Sar touched the blade of Cataclysm, which had a yellow base and a straight 2-handed sword, and laughed. "Oh, Brock always complains that he doesn't have a suitable weapon. He'll be able to use this when his arm recovers." Originally, a small exquisite weapon like the blade of Cataclysm would not have been given to Brock. After all, he was only Sar's guard. However, a bunch of close combat macho men were all tycoons when it came to weapons. The 2 paladins had divine weapons, but Sar and Grom each had their own special weapons. Old Cow liked totem poles, so Brock could only take advantage of it. Moreover, the warrior equipment was basically distributed among the Horde members, so there would be no conflict. The competition among the mages was the fiercest. After Duque's withdrawal and Kale, that's lack of desire, the remaining 4 became extremely humble. In the end, Ronan was the biggest winner in the war. He obtained the one-handed magic sword, Chaotic Storm, that countless mage players had begged their grandfathers and mothers to get. Because he did not have a good secondary weapon, he almost wanted the Staff of Purification, that priests loved, but Duque could not stand it and gave Ronan the secondary magic book, Chronicles of Dark Secrets, that he got from Riki Winterfrost. There was also a gorgeous robe that was pure black with purple and gold edges. Although everyone found out that it was an unknown robe after appraisal, and they wanted to name it Duque's robe, Duque blushed. Ever since he had blessed Ronan with holy light and found out that the holy light above Ronan's head was also green, Duque had guiltily, very humbly, given the right to name it. Ronan's robe? No problem. He waved his hand and generously gave the robe to Ronan. Seeing that Jaina was staring at Ronan's luxurious outfit, Duke had no choice but to give Jaina another set since he had 2 Chaotic Storm sets. After giving a few pieces of magic equipment to Caponia and Solarian, Duque also got himself a staff called Argus Apostle. This staff was a little imperfect in terms of attributes. It mainly increased endurance, spirit, and spell power, but did not increase intelligence. Fortunately, Duque's Breaking Dawn mage attributes were preserved. His intelligence was frighteningly high and he did not care about this. Since he could only be a priest for now, his original, obsidian queen, and dried tofu, could not be used for the time being. He could only make do with this staff. Fortunately, the staff's appearance was very attractive. The body of the staff was a golden double-headed staff with a brown cross tied to it. It looked luxurious and imposing after the staff was bound to the hands. The two heads of the staff were also very special. Embedded on the body of the staff were two transparent rectangular crystal ornaments, not two heads of the staff. In the middle of the long crystal frame, there were 3 blue runes on each head. The mysterious magic runes on them shone brightly. The style. This is high-end and grand. Duque suddenly felt that it was quite cool to be a priest. Chapter 971. Duque was very kind. Except for the times when he was not kind, he was very kind. There was nothing wrong with that. When Archimonde dropped 4 sets of Forgotten Protector's helmet, Sal's eyes were a little sad. Now, even a fool would know that this thing should be the same set as the previous gloves. Of course, the Horde wouldn't know what the effect of the set was. It was just that the Alliance had already forged the Forgotten Protector's gloves, and it was impossible to reforge it again. Since Archimonde had one, shouldn't they give it to him? At this time, the Alliance and the Horde were in a honeymoon period. Moreover, when they heard that there were more than 100,000 demons and more than 300,000 undead army in Fellwood Forest, the Night Elves and the Horde were very annoyed. Firstly, both sides needed help from the Alliance because the Alliance was the only one with extra troops. In fact, Duque already had a second reinforcement plan. Those who went to the Mount Hygel defense line were the most elite troops. Now that Archaron was dead, the ordinary army of the Alliance could take care of the leaderless but powerful remnants of the army. Secondly, Sal was still too inexperienced. Duque's face was full of holy brilliance and he lied sincerely, "Sigh. I really didn't know that this thing would be the same set as Asgalar's. I even deliberately made 4 hunters' gloves in advance." Looking at the other 2 Gronk Wanderer's gloves that Duque took out, Sal could only sigh. It almost made the system elf want to remind Sal, "Hey, don't be fooled by this guy's righteous appearance." In fact, this guy was a shadow priest who sneaked into the priest team. He was the biggest liar of the Holy Church. In fact, Jaina saw through Duque's little thoughts. The problem was that Jaina in this life was no longer the Virgin Mary who crossed camps. She was a firm anti-orc. Duque only cheated Sal a little and Jaina thought that Duque was too kind. The final result was that due to Duque's operation, a total of 12 sets of the Forgotten series of 2-piece sets belonged to the Alliance. The Forgotten Protector series belonged to the 4 Windrunner sisters. The Forgotten Conqueror was divided among Turalian, Mograine, Riataline, and the priest Duque. Because Jaina had Smoke Gloves and Chaotic Storm, she chose to give it up. As a result, Ronin, Kale, that's Caponia, and Solarian each got a set of Forgotten Victors. Including the sets, on average each hero got at least 5 pieces of epic equipment that could only be obtained in the Cavern of Time after 15 years. Because the spoils of war this time were so plentiful and Duke's contributions were too great, a large amount of equipment that the participating heroes didn't need were all distributed to Duke for him to use. This was Duke's sacrifice for the world, forcing him from being the world's #1 mage to become a priest as compensation. The items that seemed messy were actually all high-quality goods. The epic jewelry blueprints were all taken by Duque. The key was that there were no thieves, shamans, or warlocks among the heroes. The only druid was given up. The warlock's equipment could be digested by a mage, but the shaman, thief, and druid's equipment were all in Duque's hands. After the loot was divided, everyone dispersed to give Duque some space to rest. Looking at the excellent equipment that still filled half of the room, Duque sighed. "Vanessa, there's a lot of equipment here. Even if you can't use them, you should pick a few. You can use them when you break through to the realm of heroes." "Thank you, Master." Vanessa smiled and pulled the bow on the back of the maid uniform in front of Duque. In the next second, the black and white maid uniform was tossed into the air and floated down. Duque was dumbfounded. The reason was, of course, not because Vanessa's maid uniform was empty or anything like that. Instead, it was because Vanessa, who was wearing a set of thin leather tights, walked gracefully to the table that was covered with equipment, and put on the thief equipment dropped by the 6 bosses of Mount Hygel one by one. Black feather boots, secret merchant's pants, Agato's belt, midnight breastplate, and lethal bracers. After Vanessa put on the 5 pieces of Mount Hygel equipment that could make 99% of the thieves in the world go crazy, She picked up the maid uniform again and put it on. When she lifted the skirt of the maid uniform again and tied the two high-tier epic daggers, Endless Pain, and Tracking Dagger, to her thighs, everything was hidden under the seemingly traditional maid uniform. As if she was worried about the reverse ring, that added hit, critical hit and attack strength, Vanessa took out a string and threaded it. She then put it into her not-so-deep trench and smiled in satisfaction. Duque was dumbfounded for a long time. In the real world of Azeroth, there were no strict requirements for equipment levels. At most, it was just a matter of how much power the user could bring out. Generally speaking, as long as a physical profession stepped into the realm of heroes, most epic equipment could be used. The simplest indicator was whether the equipment would emit a specific light when it was worn for the first time. For example, Excellent was green, Excellent was blue, and Epic was naturally purple. When Vanessa put on the high-tier epic equipment of Mount Hyjal just now, it emitted an incomparably noble and elegant violet color, which meant that she could completely use the equipment. As if he had lost control after a stroke, Duque extended his right index finger shakily. Vanessa, when did you break into the realm of heroes? Vanessa smiled like a flower and twirled the hem of the maid uniform with her fingers. She gave a maid's bow. Oh, my dear Master Marcus, it's been 5 years. Duque was dumbfounded. It was clear that he was saying, why didn't I know? Why didn't you tell me? I'm sorry, my master. I didn't mean to hide it from you, but the profession of thief relies too much on equipment. Without a pair of good weapons, I can't even easily deal with an elite-level demon guard. Although I also know that you need combat power to besiege Archimonde. Unfortunately, as far as I know, you usually don't have any thief equipment collection, master. So you hid it from me? Duque was speechless. Yes. I, who lacked the support of equipment, couldn't use it at all even though my skills were far superior to my father's, so I kept quiet. If master sees this as me being disloyal to you, please punish me as you wish. Vanessa knelt down in front of Duque after saying that. Chapter 972. Duque was really annoyed. He really couldn't blame Vanessa. Physical professions relied on weapons the most. A rookie with a godly weapon in his hand, or a veteran with a stupid white weapon. Whose attack was higher? Ignoring the fact that he was courting death, the rookie could beat the old bird 100 times over in terms of attack. Moreover, when Duque had cleared out Karazhan in the early years, he had given all the equipment to her father, Edwin Van Cleef. Although the epic equipment of Azeroth did not need to be distributed on the spot, the problem was that once it reached epic level, it would be bound to the soul. It could not be transferred at all. Considering that there were too many melee combatants against Archimonde, it would be too easy for Air Blast to harm old Cao Cain, so Duque did not let Edwin come at all. This was a bit dramatic. Duque sighed. All right, get up. I've never intended to blame you for this. Vanessa quickly got up, a victorious smile on her face. All right, my beloved master. From today onwards I can be anyone to you, your most loyal maid, your dagger in the dark. At this point, Vanessa suddenly changed the topic. Or your clearest eyes and ears. I'll go open the door. It should be your spoils of war delivered to your door. Spoils of war? Delivered to my door? Did Azeroth also have express delivery? Duque was dumbfounded. Vanessa's upper body did not move, but her lower body seemed to have activated sprint, and she floated out of the room at high speed. What the hell was this? The surroundings suddenly fell silent. The wizard tower was not just a lair for mages, but also a place for mages to conduct experiments. Soundproofing magic was a must. Thanks to the good soundproofing of the wizard tower, the noise outside could not affect this place at all. Duque found himself tired. He had fought with Archimonde for most of the day and then he was hit. Then he woke up and adjusted his body, and then there was the spoils of war. Unknowingly, it was already midnight. It was time to rest. Looking at the empty room, other than a cabinet, a full-length mirror, a small table and a bed, there was no other furniture. Duque suddenly felt that this guest room was terrible enough. Come on. Forget it, let's sleep. Duque had just fallen asleep when he felt the fluctuation of magical teleportation. He jumped up in fright. What the hell was this? A second later, a graceful female figure appeared in front of Duque. Jaina? What? In the middle of the night, Jaina suddenly appeared in front of his bed in a pink robe that looked like the quicksand robe, wearing a one-piece nightgown that was more than 50% transparent and barely covered her body. Duque stared at the faintly discernible seductive figure. His eyes widened and he felt his mouth go dry. Why are you here? Duque asked dumbly. Why? Jaina let out a pleasant chuckle. Duque, this is my wizard tower and this is my bedroom. Do I need a special reason to appear here? Duque slapped his forehead. God, I've been using my left hand too much lately. I've really become a retard. Every inch of a Magus tower was like a golden ruler. Every inch of space that was expanded would require an astronomical amount of investment in terms of defense and functionality. In particular, Theramore was newly built. With Duque's life in danger, it was impossible to have a space in the wizard tower that was both safe and wouldn't affect the extra guest rooms outside. Only Jaina's bedroom could be of this level. But, even if simplicity was beauty, wasn't Jaina, as Queen Kurtira's, too plain? The clever Jaina easily saw through Duque's doubts. Why, I remember that you've never liked luxury. Is there a problem with my bedroom being so simple? No, not a problem. Seeing Duque's eyes flickering, he hurriedly got out of bed. Jaina also picked up the quilt that Duque had just used, pulled it over, and lay down on her side with her back to Duque. Duque was a little confused. He didn't know what Jaina was up to. The air fell into a strange silence. Suddenly, Jaina's faint sigh came from the dark room. Sigh. The voice was so plaintive that it made Duque feel as if his heart was breaking. Jaina's clear and gentle voice sounded. 13 years ago, there was a little princess who was told by her father that she was going to marry the greatest hero in the world, but for the time being she could only stay by the hero's side in the name of his disciple. She came to a strange place with longing, learning everything she thought she should learn. Days passed and the little princess grew up day by day. She soon discovered that the man who was supposed to be her husband didn't love her, and even had a faint sense of disgust and avoidance. She didn't know what she had done wrong, but she thought that since this was her unchangeable fate, as long as she didn't want to spend the rest of her life in tragedy, she had to learn to change herself, and let herself become the person he liked. The little princess's efforts were never effective. Every time they met, she felt that there was an invisible wall between her and the man who was supposed to be her husband. She could only sigh at the invisible wall day after day. Suddenly, one day the hero disappeared in front of the world in order to protect the world. And the princess, who was starting to grow up, became his nominal widow. 10 years passed and he appeared again when the world was in danger of destruction. He led a group of heroes to defeat the evil demon commander. Not only did he avenge her, but he also became a hero in the eyes of the world again. But the princess, who was no longer young, didn't even have the right to stand by his side. Maybe it was because he really hated her. Or maybe it was because human women can never maintain their beauty for thousands of years like the elves, who have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. At this point, Jaina's sorrowful voice came to an abrupt stop. The air fell into a dead silence. After a long time, Jaina turned around, and under the flickering firelight, there were clear traces of tears. Duque, I don't know if my relationship with you has improved recently, but if it is, please tell me the reason why you hate me. So, please tell me the reason why you hate me. The state guest house is about 100 yards to the left of the Magus Tower. If it wasn't for... Before Jaina could finish, her mouth was already sealed. A few seconds later, Duque smiled. This was for him and also for Jaina. Fate had completely changed. Forcing the terrible Jaina from his previous life onto the Jaina who was willing to die with him in this life was simply stupid and blasphemous. Looking at Jaina, who was almost crazy with joy, Duque revealed a naughty smile. Come, let Teacher Du teach you what the flow of magic in the ORZ position looks like. Chapter 973. What in the world was ORZ frustrated front bend? Jaina didn't understand. But she was a very studious and smart student. When she saw Duque use his finger, which was filled with golden holy light, to draw the 3 hieroglyphic characters ORZ in the dark air, Jaina understood immediately. An indescribable shyness rushed out from the depths of her soul, igniting every inch of her beautiful body, making every cell excited because of the anticipation of the unknown. Slowly turning her body, Jaina used her graceful body to construct a unique ORZ with the style of Queen Kurtira's. Jaina, blushing, looked back and smiled. She should have been sly, but she pretended to be cute, with an indescribable sense of purity. Teacher Duque, is this right? Is my training posture correct? If it's not, please correct me, teacher. Teacher Duque looked at the perfect curve and swallowed. He helped correct it while saying, here is wrong. Legs need to be separated a little more, and then here needs to be held up a little higher. Don't block the view. And then? Don't move. Why are you trembling? Duque asked, knowing the answer. Isn't it because you are interfering with my magic circuit? That won't do. You practice frost magic, so you have to maintain a calm state of mind at all times. Jaina rolled her eyes at Duque and let him do whatever he wanted. Come to think of it, she had waited for 15 years. The most beautiful 15 years of a woman's life were spent in loneliness and waiting. She almost missed the shelf life of her youth. The only good thing was that she could finally give away this treasure before she turned 30. Jaina silently followed her heart, not deliberately or pretentiously. When the magic circuit from Duke finally connected with her magic circuit, she cried and laughed. She let go of all her schemes and did not think about anything else. She enjoyed and endured this storm that she thought would never come. It was a storm that was 13 years late. During the long night, the teacher and disciple did many kinds of magic experiments. For example, the physics of friction heat generation. For example, the magic power flow experiment in the M-shaped pose. It was not until the end of the long night that Jaina finally fell asleep with tears on her face. The first rays of dawn appeared. Duque noticed that Jaina had woken up early in the morning and was staring at him strangely. "What are you thinking about?" Duque smiled, a little curious. Jaina caressed Duque's chest with her jade-like fingers. "I'm wondering how long these days will last." Sigh. Elves were good, they didn't have to worry about aging. Human life is too short. Although she's beautiful because of her short lifespan, when I think about how much of my youth I have left to fight for the favor of those heaven-defying existences who won't age for tens of thousands of years, I feel a little hopeless just thinking about it. A wave of guilt surged in Duque's heart. "Gianna. Promise me you'll keep it a secret." "I swear I won't reveal any secrets about you." As smart as Jaina was, she subconsciously felt that Duque was going to bring out something good, but she didn't know what it was. "Actually, when I saved the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Her Majesty the Queen gave me a small gift as a thank you." It's the same as the night elves from before, the eternal kind." Duque was very vague. How could someone as smart as Jaina not know? Jaina's expression was very interesting. Before Duque transmigrated, there was never a lack of women who spent half a month's salary or more on cosmetics every month. If she didn't buy enough cosmetics every month, she would eat whatever the dog ate. If she bought too much, she would eat whatever the dog ate. If it was November 11th, she might have to prepare to eat dogs that month. Duke had still underestimated immortality, eternal youth and whatnot. To a beautiful woman who loved beauty and was about to grow old, it had a great lethality. Next, Jaina told him that she was actually also a fire mage, and her ultimate move was passionate fire. Ignoring her injured body from last night's experiment, Jaina courted death and unlocked almost all the poses. Then the two of them experimented until late in the morning. Noon, Servanas looked at Jaina, who hid under the blankets with only two clear and shy eyes, not daring to make a sound. Then he looked at the embarrassed Duque. "Hey Duque, you're really something. This? Do you think Jaina would dare to take you away without my permission?" Queen Sylvie sat on the wardrobe, her long legs dangling. "I knew you wouldn't be able to let go of this relationship. I only reluctantly agreed because she was willing to die for you. Duque, I'm not a jealous woman, but you have to know when to stop." I understand." Just as Duque was about to say something, Vanessa knocked on the door. "Master, Her Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind requests an audience." Duque felt a little strange. Because he could become a shadow priest, and to avoid suspicion, he had actually handed over his authority as the commander. After a short discussion, the highest commander of the alliance in Kalimdor was now Turayan. This was also a good example for the older Mograine to make way for Turayan, who was in his prime. If they were to encircle the Burning Legion in Felwood Forest, Tyron would have looked for Turayan and not him. "Ask her to wait in the conference hall." "No, ask her to come to my wizard tower. After all, the relationship between the Night Elves and the Alliance isn't very stable." Jaina was a little more cautious. "You." Duque couldn't help but look down. "Help me heal." Jaina glared at Duque fiercely. 15 minutes later, Duque, who was dressed formally, arrived at the lower level of the wizard tower with the two queens. He saw Tyrant, who was a little anxious. "Welcome to Theramore. How may I help you, Her Excellency Whisperwind?" Tyrant's exquisite face was filled with deep exhaustion. The destruction of an army of 100,000, the destruction of Mount Hyjal, the elimination of the Burning Legion, the resettlement of the refugees, and the disappearance of the dragon race's blessing due to the destruction of the World Tree. The Night Elves no longer had eternal life and youth. All these things were weighing heavily on her slender shoulders, making it hard for her to breathe. The joy of victory that could still be seen in the higher-ups of the Alliance was almost gone from her face. After all, the Alliance would at most worry about the compensation, but she had to worry about the future of the entire Night Elves. I'm here this time to ask His Excellency Duke Marcus. Tyron's expression suddenly changed halfway through her sentence. Wait, what about your element? Duque smiled bitterly. I'm sorry. The moment I killed Archimonde, I suffered a backlash from the demon commander's curse. It took me a lot of effort to change the nature of the dark power he injected into my body, but I'm afraid I can only be a priest for now. Chapter 974. Tyron first bowed deeply to Duque. Thank you for your great contribution to the safety of the world of Azeroth. Despite her gratitude, Tyron's eyes could not hide the sadness in them. In order to save the world of Azeroth, Duque did not hesitate to risk his final attack. She had seen it with her own eyes. Objectively speaking, this was definitely a feat worthy of praise. It was a feat worthy of being sung by bards for thousands of years. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good thing for the Night Elves at all. After thinking about it, Tyron decided to say it out loud. Even though the explosion destroyed the World Tree, Nordrassil, the Well of Eternity, and Mount Hyjal as the sacred mountain of the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years, Mount Hyjal has a very special place. The Cenarian Circle has already begun surveying to see if they can restore Mount Hyjal's vitality. The problem is that the explosion seemed to have caused the space to become unstable. Now, there is a huge spatial rift at the top of the mountain. Spatial rift? Duque was a little confused. He was very sure that such a scene did not exist in the original history. However, since the explosion of the Well of Eternity had destroyed the ancient Kalimdor continent and created the Endless Sea, it was not surprising that a spatial rift had appeared. Therefore, it wouldn't be too strange for a spatial rift to appear in this explosion that was just as earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Tyron deliberated for a moment. Perhaps you also know. Because the High Elves used to abuse arcane magic and conduct various forbidden experiments, the Night Elves and the High Elves who were good at arcane magic separated. Tyron tried to choose words that were not too provocative while paying attention to Queen Sylvanas' reaction. Sylvanas smiled. Please don't take it to heart. In order to take revenge on the Burning Legion, we have changed our name to Sindorii. The forbidden experiments you mentioned were actually banned by our elders 5,000 years ago, when an Astrian Sunstrider was still in Quell Dorii. Tyron heaved a sigh of relief. This made it easier to talk. There is not a single wizard among the Night Elves. We are not good at dealing with these problems, so we can only ask for help from the Alliance. The reason why I came to find you, Sir Marcus, is naturally because you are a Breaking Dawn great wizard. Even if you are no longer a wizard, I believe that your precious knowledge and experience can be of help to the Night Elves. Moreover, the Night Elves are very grateful for the Alliance's help this time. If possible, I hope that both sides can carry out further exchanges and cooperation. The Night Elves were testing the waters. After all, the three factions had just fought side by side, and the camaraderie between comrades would not fade so quickly. On the other hand, as a wise leader, Tyron had an unspeakable worry, the expansion of the Horde's influence. In the eyes of most Night Elves, orcs, trolls, and taurens were coarse, barbaric, and warlike. Now that the Burning Legion's demons were in front of them, the three factions naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to start a conflict. What if the demon wasn't here? In front of them was the simplest problem of survival and territory. To the south of Grey Valley, it was mostly barren land. Apart from the Night Elf stronghold on Sodder Island in the southwest of the mainland, the Feathermoon stronghold, the Night Elves had almost no territorial claims on the entire south-central region of the Kalimdor mainland. It was different for the Horde. The Horde, freed from the control of the Alliance, would definitely usher in a period of explosive expansion in the following period of time. Tyron could almost foresee the conflict between the Night Elves and the Horde in Grey Valley and the Stoneclaw Mountains in the future. The destruction of the World Tree, Nordrassil, caused the Night Elves to lose their immortality. For the Night Elves, who had an extremely long lifespan, this was not a big problem for the time being. If there was no war, because of immortality and the pursuit of freedom, the Night Elves' fertility rate was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. However, they had not adjusted their mentality from losing the blessing of immortality. This time they had lost another 100,000 elites. If there was a continuous war, the Night Elves' population would not be able to cope with the meat grinder of war. In addition to the battle in Grey Valley, the Night Elves had lost the demigod Cenarius and nearly 10,000 elven hunters. The Night Elves and the Horde could be considered to have a huge grudge. However, they had just fought together, and the Taurens who believed in the doctrine of nature had joined the horde. This made the Night Elves unable to find an excuse to start a war even if they wanted to take advantage of the horde's unstable footing. Was the new hatred and territorial conflict with the horde more important, or the so-called hatred from 8,000 years ago more important? Even an idiot would know which one to choose. Moreover, the High Elves were already ruled by the Ranger Queen who was more inclined towards the nature element. Thus, it was almost inevitable to get close to the alliance that had crushed the horde twice. History overlapped again and it was inevitable. Duque was not surprised by Tyron's probing. He smiled and replied on the spot, "The Alliance is an organization that unites the various kingdoms and races with the highest common goal of the world of Azeroth's safety. Although I have temporarily resigned as the commander of the Alliance, I think the Alliance will be very happy to have deeper exchanges and cooperation with a peace-loving race like the Night Elves, who have a deep foundation and history. If there is a chance, the Alliance will also welcome the Night Elves to join the family of the Alliance." With Duque's status and identity, the two queens present also nodded in agreement. The general direction of this matter was considered to be set. Next, settling the spatial rift was a trivial matter. Duque agreed on the spot. Within 3 days he would organize a group of powerful wizards such as Kale, Thats and the dragon wizard Krasis to go together. The atmosphere of the meeting was so friendly and warm that both sides began to close the distance and call each other by name. Tyrant also took the opportunity to do Duque a favor. "Duque, actually, other than teaching me how to fight, the moon goddess Elun also taught me a lot of skills in exorcism. If you don't mind, Duque, I can help you take a look at your state. If there are any remnants of evil power, I might be able to help you." Towards Tyrant's goodwill, Duque was a little annoyed. Professionals who used dark power had always been unpopular in the Alliance. Just look at the newly built Stormwind city. Warlocks could only hole up in the Lambs to the Slaughter Hotel and play secret associations. Even after the destruction of the Dalajan and the Dalajan wizards and warlocks reconciled, the warlocks still received pitifully little training resources. The problem was that since Tyrant had put it this way, Duque could only stand up. "Please don't get too excited about what happens next. I can still perfectly control this part of the dark power." Chapter 975. Tyrant swore, "I swear that I will look at your new form and profession in the right light. In the end, you are making this sacrifice to save the world. I believe that I can understand and forgive your situation." Alright. There wasn't much energy fluctuation. In an instant, Duke, who had been protected by the golden light, suddenly turned into a dark humanoid figure. The power of darkness was so strong that it turned Duque's entire body black and illusory. However, Tyrant's expression changed drastically even though she had been talking nicely. She stood up, her face ashen, and her right hand subconsciously reached for the dagger at her waist. Unexpectedly, a ghostly figure was faster than Queen Sylvie, pressing down on the back of Tyrant's hand like lightning, making it impossible for her to unsheath the dagger. The one who made a move was naturally Vanessa, who had stepped into the hero domain. After obtaining a large pile of Seamount-level epic equipment, her movements became even more agile and fast. Tyrant was stunned. She did not expect that the delicate and docile maid would have such frightening skills. It was definitely not a good thing for a hunter to be approached by a thief. However, what shocked her even more was Duque. She apologized softly, "I'm sorry, I was too agitated. It's not because of your form, Sir Marcus, but because of your appearance. I have no choice but to recall a very, very bad memory." Duque waved his hand and Vanessa retreated. Duque had actually noticed that Tyrant had begun to address him in an unfamiliar manner. "Tyrant, when we first met, you seemed to have a very deep prejudice against me. But looking at my life's memories, that was really the first time I met a night elf. I believe that my ancestors and I should not have any conflicts with the night elves. If there really is a personal grudge, I hope that we can discuss it openly. We cannot let misunderstandings affect the exchange and cooperation between the two major forces." Tyrant took a few deep breaths, her full chest trembling. However, her once clear eyes were still filled with resentment and entanglement that seemed to come from ancient times. After hesitating for a long time, she sat down and calmed herself down. In the end, she took out an item wrapped in a mysterious power. It was an unusually shriveled banana. Queen Sylvie and Jaina could not understand why Tyrant had taken out a broken banana that should have been thrown into the bin. However, Duque cried out involuntarily, "Air-dried bananas?" There was something called courting death in this world. If you don't seek it, you won't die. Why did Duque have to court death? In less than half a second, Tyron let Duque and the two queens experience what it meant to change the weather. Tyron stood up immediately. Her eyes were filled with rage and humiliation, and the two queens had no doubt that if they were not in Jaina's mage tower, Tyron would have used her ultimate skill, Meteor Shower, or Starfall, at any moment to blast Duke into smithereens. Tyron was so agitated that the sound of her teeth chattering could be heard in the silence of the room. Tyron's anger was off the charts. Everyone in the room could clearly see her clenching her fists. Her muscles were so taut that he could see every muscle bulging from the tension on her exposed skin. Her beautiful biceps, the distinct abdominal muscles and mermaid lines between her breastplate and belt, and the graceful muscle lines on her lower body that did not affect the visual field made Duque drool. No, he was drooling in fear. At this moment, Duque was dumbfounded. He could not understand why Tyron would be so agitated by a joke that only existed among the players in his past life. She was so agitated that she wanted to kill him. Thinking back to the time before his transmigration, Duque had asked himself many times why he played games. There were only two answers. First, it was for fun. Second, it was because he was bored and needed to kill time. As a result, all kinds of annoying and asshole-tightening games were developed. Duque borrowed a thief account and dared to sneak into the Earthy Highlands, which was part of the Horde's territory, Hammerfall. There, Duque met an orc who was a bandage master. Back then, the bandage master quest was very painful. If he made a mistake, he would have to start all over again. It was very painful. As an honest and reliable young man, Duque took advantage of the fact that the cute orc player had already saved many NPCs and was about to complete his quest to ambush him. He killed the player and made him fail the quest, forcing him to start all over again. 10 minutes later, Duque did it again. Later, the poor Horde player even opened a new account to the Iron Stove Fort and scolded the poor guy who lent his account to Duque for being immoral and having a baby without a pair of eyes. So, now that he thought about it, it was all because of his youth. However, this reflected how often the thieves from the Horde and the Alliance went to each other's territories to have friendly exchanges. The air-dried banana incident was vaguely remembered. A Horde thief went to the main cities of the Alliance and took advantage of the main city leaders to steal items. One had to know that thieves had to use all sorts of stolen chests to practice lockpicking. Only then would they feel the greatest sense of accomplishment. When the thief was wandering around Darnassus, he passed by Tyron's body and found a dried banana on her body. It was normal for a leader boss to have all kinds of drops. The problem was that Tyron was a female and she had many fans. From 2007 to 2017, Tyron had been in the top 10 most fantasized about by male Warcraft players. Even after 10 years, she still appeared in all kinds of 18x manga. She was known as the model worker of the filthy witch world. Under the buff of this halo, everything changed because of this banana. This banana was now in the World of Azeroth Museum's collection and was named World of Azeroth's 10 Most Influential Items in 2007. Or rather, a tool. Duque really wanted to convince himself that bananas were just fruits. After all, when he was in high school, he had seriously explained S to a particularly stupid girl. And was Superman meaning Superman? This caused the girl to foolishly say, "I also like S." And things got out of hand. Alright. I digressed. Anyway, Duque said that bananas were just fruits and was slapped away by everyone. Chapter 976. When all the topics revolved around the banana, public opinion reached an all-time high. For example, the fruit stall in front of Tyron's palace in Darnassus was booming. Insider X and the stall owner revealed that the dried bananas on Tyron's body were bought from this stall. Naturally, business was so good that the stall owner hired a team of 500 goblins to transport the bananas. There were fans who came to Tyron's palace after hearing the news. There were fans who bought many baskets of bananas and expressed their love for Tyron. There were also peddlers who were jealous of the stall owner's business and told Tyron that bananas were not as good as cucumbers. Those who used it would know. In summary, because the bananas changed the mindset and behavior of many perverted players, a large number of tourists, fanatical fans, and various spies flocked to Darnassus. Of course, the ones who benefited the most were the fruit stall owner and the residents and peddlers of Darnassus. Because of this, their wallets were filled to the brim. Per capita GDP increased by 4,000%. Later, historians and economists unanimously named this period of prosperity as the Age of Bananas. 500 years later, a huge monument in the shape of a banana was erected in the plaza in front of Tyron's palace. It was also named as one of the 10 wonders of Azeroth. Many young and rebellious elves announced that they believed in the banana god and preached in front of the monument. Historians, scholars, and the Men's Rights Association jointly declared that this was a symbol of the rise of the elven male race. Of course, the above information about the dried bananas was all bullsh*t. This was because the air-dried banana story was a fabricated piece of history. Even the air-dried banana comic was made up by a few stupid cartoonists based on this story. It wasn't the official history of Azeroth at all. Why would Tyrant fly into a rage because of the words, dried bananas? Duque was completely dumbfounded. Tyrant seemed to be using a great deal of willpower to suppress her outburst. Even though Duque's loss of voice just now seemed to be gradually proving that Duque was the bastard that she dreamed of every night, she still lacked a very crucial piece of evidence. Tyrant stood in front of Duque and the others like a volcano that was about to erupt. She spent a lot of effort telling herself to stay calm. After a while, her heaving chest finally calmed down. Tyrant sensed the undisguised hostility in the eyes of the female servant who was obviously a hero-tier thief, then looked at the two queens who were ready to attack at any moment, and then looked at Duque who was still a little confused. Tyrant suddenly realized that she had made a big fuss over a minor issue. Tyrant was vexed. Oh Tyrant. No matter how suspicious Duke Marcus was, even if he claimed to have resigned from his position as commander, he was still a Grand Duke of a kingdom. He was still the leader of the incomparably powerful alliance. How could I shed all pretenses of cordiality with Duque over such a private matter? Tyrant shuddered. She did not dare to imagine what the consequences would be if the Night Elves offended both the Alliance and the Horde. Tyrant quivered and her imposing manner dissipated. She sat down again a little dispirited. My apologies, please forgive my rash and extreme actions. As this concerns an important private matter that concerns my reputation, I hope to meet with Sir Marcus alone. Impossible. Queen Sylvie retorted resolutely. Do you think that the people of the Alliance are fools or blind? Don't tell me that you didn't have killing intent just now. Jaina's expression was even colder, and she directly pierced through the last layer of concealment. Even Jaina, who was usually tactful, had such a huge reaction. One could well imagine how much Tyrant's killing intent provoked the two queens. My sincere apologies again. Tyrant deliberated for a moment and took out 2 scrolls. These are the scrolls of my unique battle technique, True Shot Halo, and a letter from an arcanist of the High Elves that can be traced back to ancient times. I hope that this can slightly alleviate the uneasiness and confusion that my rudeness just now caused you. True Shot Halo was definitely a good thing. Sylvanas, who had fought alongside Tyrant, had personally experienced how powerful it was to increase one's attack power by nearly 30%. As for the magic letter, it was even more impressive. Magic was originally exclusive to the Blue Dragons led by Maligos. After it was spread, the Pharaoh who was the most proficient and oldest in magic were the High Elves. Tension. They were the High Elves led by Queen Azhara more than 10,000 years ago. The ones who crossed the Endless Sea and arrived at the Lordaeron continent were the High Elves who had already been shaved once. Sylvanas and Jaina frowned. Tyrant was definitely not normal. This kind of immature action was not something that a veteran leader who had led the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years should do. While the gift had been prepared in advance, it was most likely that it had been used to improve her personal relationship with the leader of the Night Elves. Now it had become a remedy. The only explanation was that this personal matter had a huge impact on Tyrant, enough to cause her to lose control. The two queens looked at each other and Queen she spoke. We will cautiously accept your gift of apology for the time being, but we are Duque's partners. We do not think that there is anything that Duque cannot tell us. We cannot accept your request for the rest to leave. In other words, it was better for her to lay her cards on the table. Otherwise they would rather choose not to accept the gift. And depending on your situation, it would determine our and even the entire Alliance's attitude towards you. This was actually forcing Tyrant into a dead end. Was her personal grudge more important than the future of the Night Elves? She had to make a choice. Taking 3 deep breaths, Tyrant forced herself to calm down. Biting her lips, she said, "This is indeed a private matter, but it is very important to me. Please try your best to answer my question honestly. This is a huge question that has been bothering me for countless years." Duque returned to his normal state and sat upright. "Ask away. As long as it does not involve the secrets of the Alliance, I do not mind answering honestly." "How old are you? Are you a pure human?" Tyrant asked in a trembling voice. Tyrant's question left Duke and the two queens scratching their heads. Duque answered honestly. A 29-year-old human, that's right. I don't think I'm a mixed blood. Age before transmigration did not count. Although he was still a year away from turning 30, he was still barely in the realm of uncles. Tyrant seemed to secretly sigh in relief. The lifespan of humans seems very short, right? Chapter 977. Jaina, who had just used Nozdormu's blessing to return to her 18 years of age, blushed. Very few humans can live past 100 years. Of course, the former guardian Aegwin used powerful magic to maintain her life, but no human has ever lived past 1,000 years. Tyrant asked tentatively, 10,000 years. Is it impossible? No. Yes. Humans are not elves. Jaina said resolutely. Besides, the humans of Azeroth 10,000 years ago were still savages. Humans began to possess intelligence and know how to make weapons more than 5,000 years ago. It was only 2,800 years ago that Thoradin the Great united the human clans, and humans became one of the masters of this world. Duque was naturally not 10,000 years old, but the special 10,000 years reminded Duque of a very important part of the original storyline. Why did I suddenly feel a little flustered? Tyrant seemed to be unwilling to give up. Then, is Sir Marcus from Azeroth? Or was your ancestor from Azeroth? Sylvanas finally lost her temper. She stood up abruptly and stomped in front of Tyrant. She placed her hands on her hips and glared at Tyrant like a ferocious beast. Her queen's aura was fully unleashed. Your Excellency, Tyrant Whisperwind. We don't find it interesting that you are beating around the bush to get information from Duque. You can either confess to every detail of this matter, or you can pretend that it never happened. Please note that you are accusing the Grand Duke of Stormwind, whose fief is even larger than Mount Hyjal. Tyrant's expression could be said to be marvelous. Finally, after realizing that her rashness might lead to serious consequences, she hesitated for a while before speaking. It was 10,000 years ago, when Queen Azhara led Sargeras's burning legion to invade the world of Azeroth. In that battle, Tyrant was unfortunately captured. Originally, she thought that she was destined to die tragically. However, an incomparably mysterious human of unknown origins found her, who was already poisoned and infected with a terrifying curse. For freedom and life she paid a heavy price. Tyrant refused to divulge the details. It's a man called Duque Kong. Like Duque, he can use the power of shadow and light. He is at once my benefactor and at the same time the man I hate. That's right, he did save me from being killed by the devil. But soon after I agreed to his conditions, I realized that even if he didn't do anything, Malfurion would arrive. But because of this, of course he could have chosen to kill me. In that case, it's impossible for Malfurion to revive me when I'm poisoned. So I'm very conflicted. Even though Tyrant's words were vague and incoherent, the two queens could understand how she felt when she was at a disadvantage. Jaina rolled her eyes and flirtatiously winked at Duke. Yo, Duque. Fortunately, you can't go back to 10,000 years ago, otherwise I would have thought that Du Kong was you. Tyrant's face had turned green from Queen Sylvie's interrogation. On the other side, Duque found that his mind was about to be separated from his body. At this moment he roughly understood what was going on. Damn it, the person Tyrant was referring to as Du Kong was definitely him. After all, Chinese people always like to put gold on their faces. Duque didn't have Du Fu's talent, but he had a good alcohol tolerance. He could drink 2 liters of 50% white wine without panting. Back then Duque was full of class. Therefore, Du Kong became Duke's QQ username when he was in university. Whenever there was a drinking occasion, he would use 2 identical glasses to pour a glass of Sprite and a glass of white wine. Bottoms up, you can do whatever you want. That heroic spirit would definitely cause internal injuries to people who couldn't drink. Even though he didn't have that much money to drink high alcohol, humans always had dreams. Naturally, Duque's dream was to drink more Du Kong. Du Kong is the only one who can solve my problems. This was Duque's catchphrase. Alright, the culprit was out. Duque, who was familiar with history, pieced the whole thing together. The first time he met Tyrant in Grey Valley, he was targeted. For some unknown reason, Duke who had entered the ancient war that happened 10,000 years ago in the original history. Of course, it was because Duque and the others had returned to the past and stopped the collapse of history that the current Azeroth was created. In other words, the Duque who had returned to the past must have succeeded. Otherwise, Azeroth would have been a world destroyed by the Burning Legion. Here came the problem. The Duque who had returned to the past must have done something to Tyrant. Otherwise, Tyrant wouldn't have immediately revealed such a hateful expression when she saw the current Duque. Come to think of it, the current Duque had been wronged. Because the future Duque had gone to the past 10,000 years to cause trouble, the current Duque had to take the blame. What kind of bullshit was this? This was similar to the incident where the current version of the Time King Nozdormu killed the future Nozdormu, causing the two Nozdormu to die together. The worst part was that this was indeed the sin of him. But Duque didn't even know what he had done to Tyrande after returning to the past. Even if he wanted to fix the problem, he couldn't do it. He didn't know if he could return to the past and not cause such a mess. Duque's balls hurt. But confessing to something as stupid as this was not something Duque would do. Confessing would result in severe punishment. Resisting would result in going home for the new year. Duque definitely understood this logic. Thinking of this, Duque had an idea. The silent best actor Duque made his move. He stood up, his handsome face facing the sky at a 45-degree angle. 2 drops of crocodile tears flowed down his face after being slightly stimulated by the system elf. He slowly walked to Tyrande, who was sitting on a chair, and pressed his hands on her shoulder plate in an exaggerated manner. Your Excellency Tyrande Whisperwind. I want to say that before yesterday I was a Breaking Dawn wizard respected by tens of thousands of people, a great hero respected and worshipped by tens of millions of people in the Alliance, the highest commander of the Alliance. But look, what am I today? A freak who possesses both the power of darkness and light. Because of this, I had no choice but to resign from my position as commander of the Alliance. I even had to bear the criticism of the people of Theramore, my homeland. Duque's words struck Tyrande, who was already in a mess. That's right. It was only yesterday that Duque became a shadow priest. Why did I suspect him? An indescribable sense of guilt welled up in Tyrande's heart, and she didn't dare to look at Duque directly. Chapter 978. The Movie King continued his performance. When Archimonde climbed the world tree that the Night Elves and even the entire world cherished, when all the other heroes were helpless against Archimonde, who had started to absorb the power of the world tree, you all turned your expectant gazes to me. When Duque said this, Tyrande shuddered. She lowered her head, not daring to look at Duque directly. That's right, at that time, there were those who looked at Duque with anticipation, or rather, forced him to make the final blow. Tyrande was one of them. I didn't let you down. I didn't let down the billions of lives in the world of Azeroth. Even though I knew that I would definitely suffer the backlash of Archimonde's death, I didn't hesitate. Even today, even though I've become a monster of light and evil in the eyes of others, I've never regretted it, because I sacrificed myself for the world. Such an open and honest speech. Such a righteous and awe-inspiring aura. In front of Duque, Tyrande was too ashamed to show her face. She felt that she was a despicable, evil woman. Even though they looked almost identical, Duque was a superhero who risked his soul to save the world. Moreover, the time and condition didn't match. How could she doubt him? What's wrong with me? Unlike Duque's crocodile tears, Tyrande's tears were really flowing. She covered her face and let her tears flow freely. She kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've misunderstood you. It was really my fault. I shouldn't have doubted a hero like you. Duque retracted his hands and turned around. With his hands behind his back, he showed Tyrande an incomparably tall and broad back. Since you've confirmed that it's a misunderstanding, that's good. In the past, I definitely didn't do any evil deeds that purposely hurt good people. But in the future, I might be corrupted by the power of darkness and do some terrible things. I hope that one day in the future, you can forgive me and give me a quick end on account of the fact that I once saved the world, and then leave a sufficiently fair and objective epitaph on my tombstone. That's enough. What was a hero? This was a hero. Even if he was trapped in an evil curse, his body was still broken, but his will was strong. That awe-inspiring righteousness was simply a role model for mortals in the world. Regardless of whether Duque believed it or not, the 4 women in the room all believed it. When Duque said this, Tyrande was not the only one crying. Even Servanas and Jaina were deeply moved. They could not control themselves and rushed into Duque's embrace, crying non-stop. Vanessa, on the other hand, was secretly wiping her tears in the corner of the room. Regardless of whether or not Duque would seek death in the future with this foreshadowing, even if Duque were to be exposed in the future, he probably wouldn't have to die. Maybe I'll die once or twice or something. That was the end of the matter. The Alliance army, together with the Night Elves and less than 10,000 Orc elites, were chasing after the demon army in Fellwood Forest. 3 days later, only a few heroes came to Mount Hyjal, as well as Tyrant in less than 500 centuries from the moon goddess temple. A few days ago, this was the final battlefield of the battle with the Burning Legion. As the center of that shocking explosion, the entire mountain peak was almost turned to dust. Because of the explosion, the mountain peak that was once like a basin had been lowered by at least 50 meters. The originally lush basin on the mountaintop was now a desolate ruin without any plants or water. But Duque knew that this scorched ruin would become a holy land in a few decades. The famous Nordrassilin would be built here. Letting out a soft sigh, Duke looked at the 15-meter-wide spiral-shaped spatial rift floating in midair and suddenly felt a little pain in his balls. Yet another unknown change. The shift of the world was completely out of control. Even the system elf could not estimate how much of the overlap was left. Now, the most knowledgeable mages in the world, or rather, the most imaginative mages in the field of mystery, were all here. Duque, Jaina, Ronan, Kale, Thats and Krasis all walked around the portal. Will this be the second dark portal? Tyron was very nervous. Although Nordrassil was destroyed in the eyes of the Night Elves, it was still a holy land. It was not fun to have spatial rifts that kept running out of demons or evil creatures in the Holy Land. Kale, Thats was the first to give up. He used to be the elf prince, but he had spent most of his talent points on politics. His major was fire. Ronan was also sighing. He was an arcanist, but he was also more focused on fighting. His extra talent points were all spent on diplomacy. In the 10 years that Duque had been missing, he had been busy maintaining the relationship between the Cursed Land's Overwatch Castle and the Dalajan. Jaina, on the other hand, had made great progress in spatial magic under Aegwyn's guidance. She thought for a moment and said, "This used to be the Well of Eternity. The high concentration of mana here supports this portal. There is indeed a possibility of interplanetary teleportation." Krasis glanced at Duque and suddenly laughed. "Let me speak first. Otherwise, if Duque speaks, I will lose all face." Duque smiled and did not speak. To make this the second dark portal, there must be two conditions. First, there must be a large and stable spatial rift here. Second, there must be a stable source of mana. At this point, Krasis raised two fingers and said, "Neither of the two conditions are met, so it's incomplete. This place is too unstable." "How so?" Tyrant asked. Krasis smiled but did not speak. As if he wanted to test Duque, he raised his chin at Duque. In Duque's vision, green data flowed down like a waterfall. Very soon, Duque had an accurate answer. "If we don't do anything, nothing will happen here. But if a demigod mage or warlock interferes, this place will be dangerous." Duque suddenly spat. He thought that if he were still a Breaking Dawn mage with his and the System Elf's shocking control, he could use this incomparably rare and spatial mana to bring Aurelia and Sasha back. Thinking of this, he became extremely frustrated. He still had some hope. "Krasis, if we can get Maligos or Nozdormu to help, we might be able to use this power to bring your queen back to Azeroth." Chapter 979. Hearing this, Krasis's eyes lit up. He could not contain the excitement in his heart. It had been 10 years. He had lost contact with the queen he loved for a full 10 years. It would be a lie to say that he did not blame Duque. If not for Duque deceiving his queen with a new toy, Alexstrasza would not have been blasted into the void with Karazhan. Now that he heard that there was hope for the queen, Krasis was so happy that his heart almost flew out of his chest. "Wait for me one day." It was no secret among the higher-ups of the Alliance that he was a dragon. However, when he transformed, he almost scared Tyrant and her sentinels. In front of everyone, Krasis stretched out his arm. At first, it looked like he was stretching out human skin, but it grew longer and longer. At the same time, his slender fingers turned into red claws covered in protrusions and cuticles. His back arched quickly, and a pair of red bat wings shot out from both sides of his shoulders at the same time. His body seemed to be blown by the wind, growing rapidly until he looked like a large red lizard. In just 3 or 4 seconds, Krasis grew bigger and bigger. He was the size of 4 people, 5 people, and then 10 people. Immediately, all humans and elves seemed very small in front of him. Just like that, Radiant Moon Wizard Krasis turned into a dragon, Kalistras. With a flap of his wings, he soared into the sky and disappeared into the clouds in a few breaths. Duque recovered from his raised state and looked away. Only then did he realize that the Night Elf sentinels had all knelt on the ground. Even Tyrant, the high priest of the moon goddess, was bowing. This was a sign of respect for the dragons. After all, it was the blessings of the 3 dragon aspects that gave the Night Elves eternal life and eternal youth, as well as 10,000 years of prosperity. Tyrant had naturally heard of Duke's relationship with the dragons in this period of time. What one hears may be false, but seeing is believing. Seeing Duke make an ancient dragon run errands for him with a single suggestion, one could imagine how important Duke's words were to the life-giver. Moreover, Mount Hyjal had just been destroyed, and the scorched land needed Alexstrasza's support even more. Tyrant could not help but look at Duke with a hint of respect in her eyes. Waiting was boring. Of course, Jaina and Ronan looked at this spatial crack with great interest. Kale, that's brought a large group of his followers to a resting tent. Duke was a little surprised to notice that Solarian, who was beside Kale, was actually wearing a mage robe that did not match the blood elves and high elves. Although it looked like the mage robes of Stormwind City, the color and style were more similar to Vanessa's maid robes. What was even more eye-catching was the medal of the Marcus family pinned on Solarian's chest. Solarian walked up to Duke and knelt down on one knee. This time she didn't speak in Elvish but in standard human language. Respected hero Duke Marcus. According to the ancient oath that I, Solarian, made on the Salus Trail, as long as my lord Kale, can restore his reputation in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, I am willing to be your servant for the rest of my life. Now the great astromancer Solarian has come as promised. Please take me in, Master Marcus. If Solarian had not mentioned it, Duke would have forgotten about it. Now that he thought about it, she was serious. Duke was a little confused. He said in a trembling voice, Kale, that's this? Am I stealing your follower? The marshal forced Kale, to smile gently and slowly shook his head. No. Duke, you don't understand the ancient customs of the High Elves. If a follower can use himself as a price in exchange for a new life for his master, this is a great honor for a follower. Not only Kale, but Caponia, Tyrannicus and other followers behind him also nodded at the same time. Caponia had tears in her eyes but said with a smile, Lord Marcus, we are actually very envious of Solarian, who can make such a great contribution to our master who is in a desperate situation. Although we are more grateful to you, Lord Marcus. As she spoke, she was already sobbing. Kale, stepped forward, gently took Duke's right hand, and then put Duke's hand on Solarian's head. This feeling was very strange and Duke almost withdrew his hand. Kale, explained, if Solarian's new master is you, whether it is me, my followers or Solarian herself, we are all very willing. To be honest, if it weren't for the large number of followers following me, I would want to become your follower. So please accept Solarian as your maid. Hearing Kale, say this, Duke still felt that it was very strange. As a transmigrator, although it was very cool to accept the second boss of the historical Storm Stronghold as a maid, he still felt that something was wrong. Isn't it a bit too corrupt? The somewhat honest Kale, did not see that Duke, the slut, was actually being unreasonable. He even foolishly persuaded Duque, just accept her. Aren't you a priest now? Isn't it very inconvenient to teleport? It would be great if he accepted her. Besides, if you refuse to accept her, Solarian will be regarded by her compatriots as an untrustworthy and extremely despicable exile. She is a lowly existence that is even worse than a slave. Caponia and the other loyal followers of the prince unexpectedly knelt down and pleaded in unison with Duque, Lord Marcus, please reconsider. If we can take Solarian in, it will be her glory and the glory of all of us followers. Solarian had already burst into tears. Master Marcus, please have mercy. Accept me. Otherwise I have nowhere to go. The best actor Duque let out a long sigh and pretended to accept his fate. Before Solarian did not come, Duque was really worried. Of course he could command Ronan and Jaina to work. But Ronan had to take his place to control the Dalajan, and Jaina herself was a queen. After being used to teleportation, suddenly having to run was really unbearable. Duque gently stroked Solarian's head. All right, you will be my maid from now on. When the time is right, I will let you go out and take charge. Thank you, master. Solarian knelt down deeply, her forehead touching the ground. Then in front of everyone, Kale, used a small pair of scissors that Caponia handed him to cut a small piece of the luxurious gold-trimmed sleeve. Caponia then handed this piece of cloth to Solarian, who raised her hands high. Solarian held this piece of cloth, and her tears flowed even harder. Your Highness Kale, please forgive Solarian, I can no longer serve you. Kale, was moved and nodded heavily, go. Duque is a good master. You must serve him wholeheartedly for the rest of your life. If you betray us, let alone the Marcus family, we will definitely hunt you down even to the end of the universe. Yes, I will. Chapter 980. Duke, who was once a university student, had a very extravagant and cliché dream. He wanted to return to ancient times and become an ignorant and incompetent hedonist with the strongest backing. He wanted to bring a group of epic-rank combat power with him all day long. He wanted to go out on the streets and harm the girls of other families. Well, now that he couldn't be a villain, it felt good to be a hero. Behind him was Vanessa and Solarian, two extremely powerful girls. Even the kings of the Alliance couldn't find such a bodyguard team. Especially the Radiant Moon Pharaoh. They were all old men. How could they compare to the girls by Duke's side? Looking at Duke's expression as though he was a patient and needed to rest, Jaina rolled her eyes at Duke as he rested casually with two maids serving behind him. However, after the two of them finished researching the secrets of the magic circuit that night, even if they were just rolling their eyes, it still felt like they were flirting. They had thought that they would have to wait for a whole day. Unexpectedly, Krasis returned in half a day. I bring good news and bad news. Krasis, who had turned back into his human form, could not hide his exhaustion. Tyrant had wanted to hear the good news first, but she gritted her teeth and chose to listen to the bad news first, just like Duke. Krasis sighed. The Burning Legion seems to be angry because of Archimonde's death. They sent a rather large fleet to attack the defensive magic circle of the world of Azeroth. In the void, where mortals can't see, Malygos is fighting on the front lines. He's also slightly injured and he refuses to help. Duke's eyes narrowed. He can't even use this magic to summon the Red Dragon Queen? An angry expression appeared on Krasis' face. Yes. He rejected me decisively and then chased me away. After a pause, he continued, I'm guessing that the matter with Sindagosa angered him. All right, the Blue Dragon Queen's grave had been dug up. Malygos was very unhappy. Even if Sindagosa's soul had fallen and hated him, he was unhappy. He refused to help. It was hard to tell if he resented the Dragon Slumber Shrine for not taking care of his wife's remains, or if he resented Alexstrasza's return and the Dragon King suppressing him again. In any case, this path was blocked. Where's Isra? Although Isra was not part of Duke's plan, he still asked symbolically. The Emerald Dream is still in trouble. Duke pursed his lips. This was already two pieces of bad news. Then the good news comes from Nosdormu? Tyrant asked. Yes. Nosdormu is willing to help, but his condition is for you to help him, Duke. As if he had stepped on an invisible tail, Duke jumped up. Azeroth above, he wants me to work extra hours to save his sister? Krasis puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach. His Majesty Nosdormu's words, everyone held their breaths and prepared to listen. Of course I'm willing to save Alexstrasza. If you don't want to do this, Duke, then I'll only save Alexstrasza. This time, Duke wasn't just being stepped on, he was being set on fire. He and Queen Sylvie, who had rushed over after hearing that there was a chance to save her sisters, cursed in unison. Nosdormu, you bastard, only save the Red Dragon Queen? What a joke. Wouldn't that mean that Aurelia and Sasha would all die? After all, after being blown into the void, apart from relying on Karazhan's own defense, the Red Dragon Queen was the key to protecting Karazhan. It wasn't just to destroy the enemies but also the void. There was no light or heat, water or air in the void. Without her, the life-giver, Karazhan might not completely collapse, but it would not be able to grow plants and animals. Without plants and animals there would be no food. The people inside were destined to starve to death. No, they didn't even have to wait until they starved to death. Without plants to absorb carbon dioxide and expel oxygen to circulate the air, everyone would suffocate to death. Nosdormu was simply threatening Duke. Originally, Duke's anger was rising, but it was suddenly extinguished by Krasis' words. His Majesty Nosdormu also said that he has cleaned up your mess enough times. This time you have to help even if you don't want to. Otherwise he won't stop certain existences. In the ears of outsiders this sentence was a little nonsensical, but in Duke's ears, it was a little horrifying. Who wouldn't stop? Wasn't it those guys who came back from the future to fix history? The guy who turned history upside down was none other than me, Duke glanced at Sylvanas, who was still alive and had not become a Forsaken. He then looked at Kale, that's who didn't know why Duke was looking at him. He then looked at Vanessa and Solarian, the bosses who should have died tragically. Duke suddenly sighed. No matter what, he was the one who messed up history. Twisting history felt so good. He would be in tears when he paid the bill. Okay, now you're suffering, right? Duke went all out in grief and indignation. Okay, stop talking. I'll go, okay? Hearing that Duke agreed to jump into the pit, Krasis also let out a long sigh of relief. Although he could save his queen no matter what worried him the most was the thing that Nozdormu gave him. Krasis took out a piece of dragon scale fragment with a dim yellow glow and placed it on the table. What His Majesty Nozdormu asked you to do is all here. Please gather an elite team to help. Of course, for your peace of mind, His Majesty will first pull Karazhan back from the void and seal this spatial rift before you go. As soon as Krasis finished speaking, Queen Sylvanas rushed up and pressed her fiery red lips against Duque's. Immediately, a series of passionate kisses began. Duque, thank you. Thank you. Queen Sylvanas's longing for her sister had long ago made her forget everything else. Duque smiled happily. Your sister is also my woman. Queen Sylvanas said a little coquettishly, I don't care, I'm happy anyway. Krasis looked at Duque enjoying himself and was also very envious. He didn't want to disturb Duque. The ceremony is set for 8 o'clock tonight. I'll go and prepare the magic circle first. At this time a group of druids came in a majestic manner. Although it was only the first time they met, Duque immediately recognized the guy leading the group. It was the Archdruid Fandral Staghelm, who was famous for protecting his followers to the point of madness and eventually fell. Chapter 981. Fandral recognized the owner of the dragon scale almost immediately and ran over. Is His Majesty Nozdormu in need of help? The Night Elves are happy to help. As soon as Fandral opened his mouth, Tyron's expression became a little unnatural. The Night Elves worshipped the laws of nature and hated the abuse of arcane spells and the destruction of nature. This was a tradition since ancient times. Among the Night Elves, other than the moon goddess Elun and the nature demigod Cenarius, the Night Elves also worshipped the 3 dragon aspects that had blessed the world tree. However, Fandral had gone a little overboard. He was basically saying that the Night Elves were willing to use all their power to lick Nozdormu's boots. Moreover, it had only been 2 days since the explosion of Mount Hyjal, and Fandral had already started advocating among the Night Elves to plant another world tree so that the 3 dragon aspects could once again bless them with magic. Now that Fandral was trying to curry favor with Nozdormu, Tyron was infuriated by this seemingly generous but actually unprincipled way of doing things. After all, in Tyron's eyes, everything had to be prioritized. The first thing the Night Elves had to do was to eliminate dangers, such as eliminating the demon army and removing the spatial cracks. Only then would they have to rebuild. Now that both sides had not been done, Fandral had jumped out and said that he would unconditionally support Nozdormu's operation? Please, you don't even know what Nozdormu is going to do, and you're saying that you're going to support the entire Night Elves? No matter how good-tempered Tyron was, she could not hold it in any longer. However, she could not do anything because during the years when Malfurion was wandering in the Emerald Dream, Fandral, as Malfurion's eldest disciple, had actually controlled the Cenarian Circle. Even when Malfurion returned, because Malfurion was more focused on the natural domain, the mundane affairs were still handed over to Fandral. It was true that the Night Elves were a perverted race, but the teachings of the Moon Goddess and the teachings of the Druids existed side by side. Hence, even though Tyron was the High Priestess, she couldn't make the Night Elves her own decision. Fandral made random promises, and just when Tyron was about to say something, Fandral was slapped in the face by Krasis, or more accurately by Nozdormu. Seeing that Fandral was about to touch the yellow dragon scale, Krasis stopped him. Sorry, the Time King has made it clear that no Night Elves can participate in this operation. Fandral Staghelm's complexion was so wonderful that it looked as though someone had smeared ketchup and soy sauce all over his face. Retribution should not come too fast. Just as they expressed their desire to curry favor, the other side was slapped in the face by the Dragon Clan. This was not an admonition but a warning. Not only did Krasis stop them, but he also released his dragon's might without concealment. This was the dragon might of an ancient dragon. The weaker elven huntresses and archers who were standing guard nearby were all suffocated by the pressure. Fandral could not and did not dare to lose his temper. After all, Krasis did not represent his own dragon, but the will of the entire Wyrmrest Shrine. He could only pinch his nose and accept it. Since this is the will of His Majesty Nozdormu, then please do as you wish. With that, Fandral actually bowed to Krasis and left with his people without even looking at Duque. From the beginning to the end he really treated Duque and his people like air. Him? Ronan gritted his teeth. Queen Sylvanas and Jaina snorted coldly at the same time. Even the most good-tempered Kale, that could not help but twitch his mouth for a while. He only stopped when he saw that Duque did not say anything. Tyron had no choice but to apologize to Fandral. I'm sorry, Mr. Marcus. Fandral is the most radical nature supremacist. He hates anyone and anything that destroys nature. Also, he hates Arcanus. Tyrant apologized to Fandral. Duque waved his hand. It's fine. I know. Compared to the return of Her Majesty Alexstrasza and my lover and companion, these are all trivial matters. Tyrant bowed again and apologized. At this time, Duque finally reached out to touch the yellow dragon scale. Almost at the moment he touched the dragon scale, Duque heard an incomparably tragic howl in his spiritual sea. That was the Dragon King's howl of pain. Duque's facial muscles twitched, even though he had already asked the system elf to create 9 mental barriers in his spiritual sea in advance. The information that rushed in like a flood still broke through his 7 defenses in one breath. If it was someone with weak mental strength, they would not be able to resist in time and would become mentally disabled. Terrifying images appeared in Duque's mind. It was as if Nozdormu, the king of time, with a body as large as a mountain, had appeared in front of him. Nozdormu's body was different from the previous time when he besieged Nethario, the wing of death. Although as a special giant dragon formed from sand, his body was never the kind that was blinding. The feeling of the dragon scales that seemed to have been eroded by the wind for thousands of years and could rot and fall off at any time still shocked Duque greatly. The life force of the dragon of time was time. As the king of time he could not resist the erosion of time. How bad was Nozdormu's current state? Duque saw sand on the dragon's face, and the dragon's skin peeled off like broken plaster. Looking at the very human-like expression of despair on Nozdormu's face, Duque was extremely shocked. The illusory images in the spiritual world did not affect his vision in reality. Duque also saw the worry on Krasis' face. It was obvious that it was Duque's turn to see the illusions that Krasis had seen and experienced. Nozdormu did not speak. His figure disappeared and instead, an incomparably large continent appeared. It was a vast continent in the atmosphere that one could not see the end of. There were incomparably steep mountains and plains full of forests. As his field of vision gradually rose until it reached the universe, he could see the entire continent. Only then did Duke realize that this was the continent of Kalimdor. It was not the current Kalimdor, but the ancient Kalimdor continent before the War of the Ancients. The information that came from the dragon's scale made it easy for Duque to determine that it was the source of Nozdormu's pain. Even though he was mentally prepared, Duque still cursed in his heart. The War of the Ancients? *CKME. Ever since the dark portal opened for the first time, Azeroth kept causing trouble, but please, goddess of fate, don't make me fight the Burning Legion twice in a row. Just thinking about it made me speechless. After seeing these images, Duque suddenly returned to reality. Although he had only been immersed in the spiritual world for a few seconds, Duque felt a little exhausted. Not only was his back drenched in sweat as if he had fallen into a pool of water, but his body was also unconsciously gasping for air. Chapter 982. If it was just a simple message, Nozdormu wouldn't have created such a terrifying mental strength test. After all, even though Duque had changed classes, his body and mental strength were still at the top of the pharaoh. Duque guessed that the only explanation was that the Bronze Dragon King's scale was both a message and a test. It was a test to see if the target had the minimum requirements to pass through time and space. Krasis couldn't hide the surprise on his face when he saw that Duke only sweated and took a deep breath to pass the test. What? Duque accepted Jaina's golden handkerchief as she wiped his sweat and smiled at Krasis. What terrifying willpower. I suddenly understand why you were able to forcefully convert the dark power that even demigods might not be able to withstand after taking Archimonde's fatal blow. As expected, Duque, you're the hero of the Alliance. There's a reason behind it. Krasis didn't have the slightest bit of flattery on his face. In fact, there wasn't even a trace of pretense in his respectful expression. The mental impact was indeed very strong. Duque nodded. This is a very dangerous mission and there can't be more than 5 people. You and I will count as 2. You can pick the remaining 3. Duque wasn't surprised at all by Krasis's words. He turned his head and said, Ronan, you do it. Yes, teacher. Luo Ning bowed respectfully and touched the earthen yellow dragon scale. In the next second, Ronan screamed and fell to the ground, twitching non-stop. Everyone present wasn't an ordinary person, and they immediately realized how terrifying this mental test was. Ronan curled up into a ball on the ground, trembling non-stop as he let out indistinct groans. Oh, Kalimdor. Demon. Ancient god. He didn't say much, but every word made everyone tremble in fear. After half a minute, Ronan finally regained consciousness. His stomach cramped and he vomited on the spot. The sour and rancid smell of vomit assaulted her senses. Solarian, who was wearing a maid uniform, reacted quickly. With a wave of her hand, a well-timed frost spell froze the vomit, and immediately followed it up with an extremely precise icicle spell, blowing the vomit out of the tent. Ronan struggled to get up. He staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, Vanessa rushed forward to support him. Luo Ning's entire body seemed to collapse as he breathed heavily. He smiled bitterly. "I'm sorry, teacher. I've embarrassed you." Duque shook his head with a smile. "No, you're great." On the other side, Krasis was already applauding. "I'm ashamed. It took me a whole minute to pass this test." It should be said that Ronan is indeed a hero who experienced the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Duque had the system to separate his spirit C, but he was still almost hit, not to mention that Luo Ning had relied on his own spirit and willpower to survive. "All right. There are 2 more spots." Duque seemed to be talking to himself. Then he quickly made a decision. "Please inform Sar. I need him to send a strong warrior to help." Perhaps he did not want to admit it, but at this point in time the warrior, mage and priest iron triangle, formed by warrior, mage and priest was the standard. Without a strong warrior, the operation of the small team was not reliable. Of course, Krasis could transform into a dragon, but that was a tactical nuclear bomb that would not be used until the last moment. Because Krasis, who was not even born during the ancient war, had to go back to the past 10,000 years to acknowledge his ancestors. "The last spot, I'll go." Servanas and Jaina stood up together, each with an expression of unwillingness to pass on the responsibility. Duque decisively rejected. "I'll go because I have a secret deal with Nosdormu. I have no choice. Why are you 2 queens messing around? Especially you, Servanas. An Astrian who betrayed Quell the Loss is still entrenched in Lordaeron. Why aren't you cleaning up the traitor? Why are you interfering in Nosdormu's matter?" "No." Queen Sylvana still wanted to argue. There were even tears in the corner of her eyes. Just then Jaina suddenly pulled Servanas back and shook her head. They suddenly understood. This was the general trend. Without world peace there would be no peace in the country. Without a country there would be no small family. They all understood this kind of interlocking relationship, but they could not accept it at the moment. They had just obtained the love they had been pursuing, but they immediately had to accept separation. This was indeed very difficult. Unfortunately, they had no choice. If they had fallen in love with an ordinary man, a farmer, perhaps they could hide in a place that was not affected by the flames of war and live peacefully. Their beloved Duque was a great hero of the Alliance. A hero's glory and responsibility would always coexist. Jaina pursed her lips. "Duque, you have to promise us that you will take care of yourself." It was rare for Duque to make a solemn promise. "It's okay. I'm just going for a walk. It's not dangerous. I have proof." After saying this, he even winked at Krasis. Krasis understood on the spot. He nodded at the 2 queens to show that Duque was right. Yes. This time, they were indeed going back 10,000 years to stop the existence of evil from changing history. On the other hand, since the current Azeroth had not collapsed, didn't it mean that their mission to go back to the past was a success? If this was just Krasis' deduction, then Duque had absolute proof. He had definitely gone back to the past and done something unspeakable with Tyrant, causing her to act so out of character. "I'm looking forward to it." "No. This is so King confusing. What did I do? What did the future me do to Tyrant?" Duque had a strange sense of anticipation. That kind of eagerness was like lighting a cigarette to calm down after a gas leak alarm had been set off. I digressed. But who should I choose as the 5th person? First of all, it could not be a Holy Knight. The power of a 5-man team was limited. Bringing a Holy Knight would be no different from throwing flashbangs in the middle of the night, telling all the demons that their enemies were here and that they should come and kill them. At this point in time, the Alliance and the Horde did not seem to have any Radiant Moon warlocks or powerful shamans. In fact, the most ideal situation would be a hunter or rogue. Because in Duque's memory, the 3 transmigrators had fallen directly into the forest. It would be better to have a hero with strong detection abilities. With the mentality of giving it a try, Duque let Vanessa and Lilish try. In the end, the one who passed was Vanessa. Chapter 983. After 50 seconds, Vanessa woke up. Duque was a little surprised but also a little relieved. Sure enough, gold would shine? It seemed that Vanessa had inherited the tenacity of the original Vanessa in history. The little girl who had watched her father rise up because of injustice and eventually die, suffering the coldness of human nature, stood in front of the players more than a decade later, at this moment looking at Lilith, who had fainted, and then at Vanessa, who was stubbornly struggling to get up on the ground. Duque suddenly felt that the Vanessa in history seemed to overlap with his former little maid. "Master, did I pass?" Her legs were shaking and her face was pale. Bean-sized cold sweat gathered into small streams on her cheeks, neck, shoulders, collarbones, and other parts of her body. The sweat easily soaked the maid uniform on the outside, but it also revealed the tight-fitting leather armor under the maid uniform. Apart from Tyrant, who had seen Vanessa's strength, many people looked at Vanessa in shock. They didn't expect that even Duque's maid had broken through to the realm of heroes, and was an outstanding rogue. Gently touching Vanessa's head, Duque smiled gently. "Well done. Although there are greater tests to come, at least you passed this time. Okay, go and rest." There was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. This sentence was applicable in any world. After seeing Vanessa pass and Lilith fail, it seemed to have stimulated many people. Carponia was a little unconvinced and she tactfully suggested to Kale that she wanted to try. Kaisi could only smile bitterly and convey this wish to Duque. Duque waved his hand. "Go and try. Even if you don't participate in this mission, this kind of mental trial is a rare experience." In the end, the 4 heavenly kings around Kale, were all wiped out, dead dogs, and fainted. This made Kaisi feel a little embarrassed. In the end, he grumbled and insisted that he go. Originally, Duque thought that since Kaisi could kneel down to his father in the sun-chasing king court, his willpower should not be too strong. Obviously, Duque underestimated the prince's desire to prove himself hidden under the gentle appearance. Or rather, after the battle at Mount Hyjal, Kale, had found his backbone. 42 seconds. It wasn't particularly good. It was later than Luo Ning but faster than Vanessa. Kale, who was kneeling on the ground, looked like a victor. He raised his head high with a satisfied smile on his face. "It seems that for some reason His Majesty Nosdormu didn't let me see the relevant content. He only tested me." Kale, panted. "Sorry, I can't tell you the reason," Krasis said. Duque knew the reason. Nosdormu was afraid that the elves would return to the ancient war 10,000 years ago and become entangled with the night elves or the high elves. For example, if they killed Queen Azhara in advance to preserve the elves' ruling position, it would cause a huge deviation in history. Whoosh whoosh. "Nosdormu, you underestimate me too much. I'm Duque, the disintegrator of history." "Okay, when will we get Karazhan back and when will we start?" Duque asked. "You can go back to the old side of Karazhan first and wait. When I go to the tribe to confirm the last candidate and report the list of team members to His Majesty Nosdormu, the return of Karazhan can begin. Then you and your team have 3 days to prepare." Queen Sylvie was deeply conflicted. She wanted her sisters to return quickly, but she was also a little reluctant to part with Duque. She could only press her lips hard. An hour later, Orgrimmar. Outside this brand new unfinished city, there were huge arrow towers erected on almost all the hills. An orc saw a black dot coming from the horizon. "Dragon. A red dragon." An orc sentry shouted. "I've heard that the Dragonmaw clan used to ride red dragons to fly into the sky. Is that red dragon our companion Brock?" Another orc asked. Brock snorted. The orc who asked was very young. During the battle at the Dark Portal he was still a child, so he definitely didn't know how the orcs could ride on dragons. If the orcs conquered the red dragons forever, it would be a glory to be proud of. Unfortunately, all that was left was humiliation. Brock curled his lips. "Gasco, you fool. If you want a dragon to fly around with an orc, the only way is for the orc to stay in the dragon's stomach." Gasco shrugged, looking like he didn't care. Orc customs were very interesting. They only respected shamans and orcs stronger than themselves. Evidently, he and the other orcs felt that Brock wasn't worthy of that magnificent equipment. That's right, Brock was also a warrior who had returned from the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Unfortunately, he'd always been by the Great Chief's side. He hadn't beheaded many demons, nor had he lasted until the end of the battle against the Archerons. Brock had lost an arm, and he'd relied on human magic to recover and reattach it. He didn't fear any enemy, but time had worn away at his soul. Perhaps because of his hunchback he looked a little shorter than Gasco. He didn't have much hair, but it was starting to turn white. His face was covered in scars and wrinkles. His eyes had long since lost the desire of his younger companions. When he met their doubtful and mistrustful gazes, he revealed a deep sense of indignation and sorrow. Brock wanted to prove himself. Krasus's arrival had alarmed all of Orgrimmar. He wasn't here to fight, so he turned into human form 500 meters away from the unfinished city gates and slowly walked over. Thrall met Krasus at once. When Krasus explained his purpose and handed over the dragon's scale, Thrall was the first to touch it. 25 seconds, the best result apart from Duque. Thrall, who looked like he'd been fished out of water, muttered to himself and rubbed his chin. I think I know who to find, an outstanding warrior. He turned around. Brock. Call Brock here. Just like that, Brock was summoned. He passed the test in 33 seconds and accepted the mission. Thrall respected Brock very much. Even though many young orcs had looked down on him in the last battle, Thrall would never forget that Brock had been by his side ever since the battle for freedom in Golden Hold. Whether it was against fully armed humans, zombies, or the bloody battle with the centaurs after arriving in Duroder. Chapter 984. Even when facing Kazak and the other demon leaders on Mount Hyjal, Brock had never retreated. He was undoubtedly a hero. When facing Kazak and the twin demon lords, he had been ordered to stop the demon commandos who were trying to help their leaders. At that time he had wielded his warhammer and fought bravely. When his last comrade was split in half by a gargoyle before reinforcements could arrive, he had avenged his comrade by smashing the gargoyle with his hammer. Then there was only silence all around. When Sal arrived with his army, Brock's figure, covered in scars and standing alone in a pool of blood, had left a deep impression on Sal. In Sal's opinion, Brock's name should be almost as respectable as his own. His early exit from the battle against the Arkharans had ruined what should have been a perfect honor. However, Sal had chosen him not only because of his strength and experience. More importantly, Sal knew Brock's loyalty. Sal couldn't send an army for this kind of mission that involved traveling through time and space. He needed a confidant who was strong enough to complete this mission for him. That should have been the case, but a fellow who gave Sal a headache appeared. A burly and ferocious figure rushed into Sal's tent and picked up Nozdormu's dragon scale without a word. Then he passed the test in just 10 seconds. Sal's mouth was full of bitterness. For the sake of my ancestors, don't make things difficult for me. Gromhell screamed. Lord Howl panted heavily. He didn't look at Sal but instead looked at the elf-looking Krasus. I heard that Duque will go too. When Krasus said the word yes, Sal's head hurt. Then I'll go too. Lord Howl was resolute and unquestionable. The tribe needs you more, Sal tried to explain. What do you need me to do? Kill those demons who are running around like frightened rabbits? Or kill Arthas for the humans' revenge? I heard that the Alliance cut Arthas in half at the waist last time. Grom's voice grew louder. Grom, don't forget that you're the chief of the Warsong clan. Grom slapped his chest with a loud bam. I am first and foremost a warrior, and I am an old warrior. I've lived longer than my father and my grandfather combined. In the tribe, a guy of my age would have died many times already. Do you want me to watch Duque go on a dangerous mission, and then accidentally die in the mission? Do you want me to go see the ancestors with regret that I owe Duque my life? I don't want to die owing a human a favor, even if he is a hero worthy of respect. Grom's words made so much sense that Sal was speechless. From Draenor to Azeroth, because of the war and the harsh environment, the infant mortality rate had always been high. Although there were no official statistics, it was an indisputable fact that the average age of beastmen rarely exceeded 30 years old. Most of the orcs who had lived for a long time were shamans who did not need to go to the battlefield. Whether it was Brock or Grom, they were like living fossils who had experienced the Draenei War, the First and Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Dalajan War against the Scourge, and the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Was a miracle. Even the strongest warrior of the tribe, Grom Hellscream, was no longer young. He was 50 years old this year. 50 years old. This was an extremely ridiculous age for an orc warrior. Sal sighed. Sal, don't try to persuade me. If my son is still alive, he'll be in his 20s. Other than Duque's kindness, I have no regrets in this life. At this moment, Brock took a step forward. Sal noticed that Brock's fists were clenched even tighter. Brock's blazing eyes told Sal that since he had passed this test, he was willing to fight until his death. Sal might not know that Brock was still suffering from a deep sense of guilt. This guilt had almost swallowed his soul. His comrades were all dead and only Brock was left. He did not understand. At the same time he felt very guilty. Why did he not die bravely with his comrades? To him, living was a kind of regret, even a kind of failure. Since then he had been waiting for a chance to atone for his sins. To atone for his sins, even to die. Now, fate had finally given him this chance. How could he give up such a chance just because Grom's status was higher? The two orc heroes did not give an inch. This made it very difficult for Sal because Krasis had specified that only one person was needed. Suddenly, Nozdormu's voice came from the piece of scale. Then send one more orc. Nozdorm. Your Majesty. Sal was shocked. It's okay. With my strength, it's not a big problem to send one more person back. At most, I'll torment Duque. Who asked him to give me so much trouble. At the same time, back in front of the old Karazhan site on the upwind trail, Duque sneezed loudly. Haju Dash, did you catch a cold? The two queens turned around at the same time and looked at Duque strangely. No, I seem to feel a wave of malice from a certain dragon. Please don't mind it. It was desolate. After the explosion of Karazhan 15 years ago, this place had become a barren, scorched land. After the second battle at the Dark Portal, Duque had been busy opening up various black technology talents and had no time to care about the natural environment here. Now that he had made contact with the Night Elves, Duque wondered if he could kidnap a druid or trick Alexstrasza into helping him after Karazhan returned and turn this place into green mountains and clear waters. After all, if Karazhan became his lair again, the surroundings would be too ugly. At least the three Windrunner sisters would not like to come here. At this time, it seemed that the orcs had reached an agreement. Suddenly, a large piece of scorched land in front of Duque began to change color. In the blink of an eye, it turned into yellow quicksand. After a gust of wind blew the sand, a very small sand dragon appeared. It was a small-sized Nozdorm. Give me the spatial coordinates. A telepathic thought went straight into Duque's mind, and Duque gave it without hesitation. Then, a desert storm appeared out of nowhere and covered half of the valley. Even Queen Sheer, who did not know magic, felt that the space was shaking violently. It was as if a small hole had opened in the tightly sealed sky. In the sandstorm, as the sand blew, a clearer silhouette appeared. The huge tower, the covered bridge, the spire. That's right. It was Karazhan. When the huge mage tower returned to its original color in the vision of Duque and the others, the tall iron gate of the main gate was suddenly pulled shut, and a silver-haired figure shot out like an arrow. The next moment, Duque was hugged by a slim female figure. Chapter 985. Duque. Dragging the last syllable, she rushed over and buried her head in Duque's arms. When he raised his head, he saw a beautiful oval face with a pair of clear blue eyes. His nose was small and slightly upturned, and his mouth was brimming with a cheerful smile. When he stood up, his silver-white hair fell down to his waist. If it weren't for her pointed ears and slightly long eyebrows, others would have mistaken her for a human. Completely disregarding the others, Sasha leaned over and kissed him passionately. Their mouths and tongues intertwined. Their noses were so close that their breaths mixed together, forming a small turbulence. The passion of reuniting after a long time was so hard to endure. If there weren't so many people watching, Duque might have pushed her down on the spot. Cough cough. Behind Sasha, a noble, gorgeous and dignified female figure appeared. Naturally it was Aurelia. Instead of joining in the fun, Aurelia gave Servanas a warm hug first. Sister, yo my Servanas, you're a queen now. Aurelia saw her second sister's crown. This is just a coincidence. The two sisters' figures overlapped. Then Aurelia sniffed hard and whispered into Servanas' ear, Yo. I didn't expect my arrogant second sister to fall for him too. Sister. What are you talking about? Queen Sylvanas panicked and wanted to deny it subconsciously. Were you lying to? You have Duque scent all over you. I've been with Duque for more than 10 years. How can I not recognize him? Aurelia smiled mischievously. Impossible, I've washed myself clean. In the next second, Servanas realized that she had been tricked by her sister. She blushed and widened her eyes. Sister, you're lying to me? Aurelia's smile was like a blooming dahlia. The natural closeness of a big sister, similar to that of a mother, easily infected Servanas. Is that so? After Duke first returned to Azeroth, it was easy for a woman to let her imagination run wild as she waited in solitude. We have always been discussing. Second sister, if you are still single after 10 years according to Duke's way of doing things, it's fine if nothing happens, but if something happens he will shock the world. How can you continue to resist his charm? After saying the word, 3 times, Servanas was stunned and couldn't continue. The two sisters' smooth and warm faces rubbed against each other. Hugging her sister, Aurelia continued softly, "You're so silly. You always think of finding a man or finding a hero greater than Duque. But there's no hero greater than Duque in this world." It sounded exaggerated, but in the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, to Nazul's counterattack, to Lordaeron and Kuel Salas's resistance against natural disasters, and finally the magnificent battle of Mount Hyjal, Duque had become the real sun. The light on his body had firmly suppressed all other heroes. If it was 10 years ago, Servanas might have stubbornly refuted a few times, but now she had no temper at all. Recalling the bits and pieces since they met, thinking of the steps of the sun-chasing king's court, the himself who pulled the bowstring in despair and the heroic figure who arrived at the last moment, Servanas suddenly felt a little intoxicated. Sister. Servanas really didn't know whether it was because she felt wronged, or because she had taken such a long detour in more than 10 years, and finally couldn't escape from Duque's clutches. Anyway, Servanas burst into tears. Okay. Oh my. It's okay. Although it's a little difficult for 3 sisters to fall in love with the same man, is it okay? It seems that we don't have to be separated anymore. In a trance, Servanas saw the figure of his deceased mother and his eldest sister. The years of separation, in addition to the pressure on her body, all burst out at once, resulting in her tears not stopping at all. While crying about her own longing, she also accused a certain Du's crimes as if she was making a snitch. On the other side, after Duque and Sasha finished their passionate kiss, they looked at the 2 sisters together with a smile. After waiting for Servanas to stop crying with great difficulty, Aurelia came over with one of her sisters in each hand, smiling like a flower. Duque. Looks like you still couldn't help but make a move on second sister. Hee. Duque laughed a little embarrassedly. Also, Aurelia's beautiful eyes moved and she glanced at Jaina, who was unconsciously standing in the outer circle beside them, not knowing whether to come closer or stay away. She lowered her head and played with her 10 tender fingers, but from time to time she would sneak glances at them. Aurelia suddenly sighed. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. Yes. Instead, it was Servanas who answered hurriedly. Then Jaina nodded awkwardly. She really didn't know what expression she should use to face Aurelia. Aurelia seemed to be sighing, but Duque, who was at the side, felt that there seemed to be a lot of information. That pair of bright eyes was just like when he first met her 15 years ago, filled with wisdom, kindness, and a hint of playfulness. This eldest sister of the Windrunner family slowly walked in front of Duque, her affectionate eyes filled with endless love and tolerance like the sea. Gently holding Duque's face, she gazed at this little man whom she both loved and hated. Sweet memories of the past also floated up in her mind, flashing through her eyes. Jaina, please come over for a moment. Aurelia pulled Jaina over and then smiled brightly. Duque, no matter what happens in the future, you have to promise to treat all of us equally, okay? Understood. Don't forget to invite little sister Elugia to join our family feast later. Of course. From the eldest sister to the third sister and then to Jaina, who automatically lined up last, Duque did not miss a single one. Looking at the blushing faces of the girls, Duque knew that he had passed the test. Then, Duque saw Tyrion Fordring and Gavin Rad Doom, who were in a very good state of mind. After Ronan quickly explained the current situation to them, the 2 paladins seemed to be very active. I'm finally back. Since evil still exists in Lordaeron, it's time for me to leave as soon as possible. Tyrion saluted to Duque. Duque knew that this paladin, who was often called the Queen Mother by the players, had the most noble soul. Last time he was accidentally sent into the void with Linley, and stayed there for 10 years. This had already caused him great grievance. Now that his homeland was being ravaged by natural disasters, how could he sit still? Chapter 986. Duque smiled. If possible, eliminate the scourge in Lordaeron as soon as possible. I know you can't wait. I'll have Ronan send you to the front lines in the Western Plaguelands. Turallion is waiting for you there. Boss, I want to go too. Gavin Rad raised his hand. Boss, you can't bring me along for the mission to Nosdormu. I've been holding it in for so many years. After all, the battlefield is the romance of the brave. Do you think you'll allow me to? Looking at Gavin Rad's appearance, which had turned into a middle-aged man with a little baldness, Duque was filled with emotions. At this point in history, the 5 silver sages would have completely withered away. Turalian had disappeared in the explosion in the Outland, Uther had died under Arthas' sword, Gavin Rad had died in battle in Andoril, and Sidon Dathrahan's soul had been devoured by the Dreadlord. Now, other than Uther, the other 4 men were still active. Go. Thank you for staying with me all these years. When you can't fight anymore, come back to my fief and retire. Duque gave Gavin Rad a big hug. On the other side, Krasis had opened a portal and rushed over. He walked around Alexstrasza in human form. However, the Red Dragon Queen seemed to be in a temper and didn't care about Krasis's flattery. Instead, she walked over and said to Duque, "Yo Duque, I've helped you so much. You let me spend so many boring years in the void and you even asked me to help you take care of your woman. How are you going to thank me?" She had a cold and elegant face, a high chin, hands on her slender waist, and a perfect split of her legs. She had the demeanor of a high-end, elegant, and classy queen. A man, a big tofu, should be like a little brother, able to stretch and shrink as he pleased. Duque gave in and lowered his head. He bumped into a basin that Vanessa had passed to him and lifted the semicircular silver lid. When Duque confidently revealed the treasure inside, what appeared in front of the Red Dragon Queen was a large plate of knockoff Peking duck that exuded a soft holy light. The oily roast duck was roasted to a perfect reddish-brown color. Coupled with the holy light, its appearance alone was enough to make one drool. Even the Windrunner sisters and Jaina, who were a few meters away, could not help but stretch their necks, let alone Alexstrasza, who looked cold on the outside but was actually a glutton. Gulp. There was an obvious swallowing movement in the throat of the proud queen. She snorted and turned her head away, her nose almost reaching the sky. "Do you think that I, who has seen everything in the world, will be bought by mere mortals?" Duque cursed in his heart. "Damn it, it's as if dragons don't sleep and don't get sleepy. I've been in the void for 10 years. If I'm not eating, I'm sleeping. The number of times I've actually fought can be counted on one hand. Of course, the Red Dragon Queen is used to ward off evil spirits. I'll just treat it as feeding a glutton. Oh no, to put it more elegantly, I'm spending my time to buy peace." Of course, on the surface, Duque still gave face to this glutton queen. Duque bowed elegantly. "No, no, no. This is just a small token of my gratitude to your majesty. This is just the appetizer. Tonight's banquet will definitely satisfy you." Appetizer? The queen's sharp nose twitched secretly as if she was trying to inhale every fragrant molecule in the air. Finally, she revealed a satisfied smile. "That's more like it." She held up 5 fingers. "I want 5 meals cooked by you." She wanted to say, every week, but felt that would be too easy on Duque. In the end, she hurriedly added, "Every day." Duque looked troubled. "But I have to go to Nozdormu for a mission the day after tomorrow? It's business." Krasis hurriedly whispered into the queen's ear in Draconic. Alexstrasza's face fell. "Then, let's have a feast tonight. I'm telling you, I won't allow you to skimp on the food, and it can't be food that has been eaten in Karazhan." Of course. Duque sighed in his heart. He had passed the test. In Karazhan, with her help, there was a lot of food. Because they didn't raise chickens or ducks, it was all plants. After eating for so many years, Duque was almost sick of it. The Red Dragon Queen was the same. If not, she wouldn't have fallen in love with roast duck. While Duque was distracted, Duque was shocked to find that the queen was already wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Wait, where's the roast duck? What's with those steaming duck bones on the plate? What's with that huge red shadow that looked like a dragon's head?" Duque was speechless. Krasis's face was full of awkwardness. Alexstrasza glared at Duque. "Why are you looking at me? Have you never seen a lady eat?" "No. I've never seen a lady like you. Let me tell you, I've already spat out the bones." The humanoid Red Dragon Queen waved her small claws. "My liver hurts a little. So there's a version that doesn't spit out bones?" At the side, Duque's lovers covered their mouths, looking like they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. The banquet was held in Duque's fief in the Elven Forest, in the Windy Lake Villa. There were more people at the banquet tonight. In order to welcome the return of the Red Dragon Queen, Theon and the other Alliance heroes, William, Kalia, Kudrin, and Jurban still chose to use the teleportation portal to welcome the return of the Alliance heroes. It could be said that apart from Anduin and Abendis, who were in charge of the front lines, almost everyone who could come was here. After all, this was both a welcome banquet and a celebration for the victory at Mount Hyjal. As the host and one of the hostesses, Marchioness Elugia personally welcomed these distinguished guests at the door. To Azeroth. To the Alliance's victory, cheers. Even though he had retired from the position of the Alliance's commander, Duque's position as the core had not wavered at all. Hence he was the one who gave the toast. Cheers. Strong arms were raised high in the air. Everyone present was either a hero who persisted in the front lines or a king who spared no effort in supporting the fight against the evil king. At this moment, everyone's heart was burning with passion. The Burning Legion's boss, Sargeras, had been sent into the bottomless abyss. One of the two commanders of the Burning Legion, Archimond, had died at Mount Hyjal. Although the undead army was still entrenched in the Tirisful forest, the enemy's boss had died. Would the final victory be far away? Cheers. Chapter 987. Cheers. With a few pieces of roasted meat in her mouth that she had just bitten off a steak, Alexstrasza also shouted. The group of big shots wasn't drinking traditional wine now. As a transmigrator, it would be unfair to the audience if he did not bring harm to the world. After the end of the second battle of the Dark Portal, Duque started to work on some technology that was not really technology. For example, brewing technology. Relying on the system's memory comparison and the support of a group of wine fanatics, he managed to produce beer and white wine that tasted 8 or 9 out of 10 before he transmigrated. Now they were drinking the ice beer invented by Duque. It tasted so good. Even Queen Kalia, who did not like to drink, secretly took a few sips. William's thin beard was covered in the white foam of the beer, and he looked a little funny. Brother Duque, when are you coming back to lead us to attack Tirisful? Duque smiled. If I don't stabilize my body, I won't be able to command on the front lines. But you can't rush it. There are still more than 100,000 Alliance troops in Kalimdor to clear out the demons. You should at least wait for Mograine and Turayan to return, right? King Nosdormu is too much. Brother, you're in such a hurry to carry out some mysterious mission when your body isn't stable, William muttered. Kudrin nudged Varian in the side with a kind gesture. Who knew, Nosdormu, you bastard? Pay for my feast. As Nosdormu's elder sister, Alexstrasza immediately scolded. She obviously drank a little too much. Even though Duque had repeatedly reminded them not to mix white wine and beer, there would always be dragons courting death. However, this caused the dragon race to scold each other, which was a good thing. Of course, while everyone was celebrating, they were also discussing how to flatten Lordaeron City. In everyone's eyes, Arthas, who had been chopped in half, was already a dish on the plate. However, Duque said that everyone could only be cautiously optimistic. As a living person, Duque could not wait to be burned to ashes by the Forsaken. Unfortunately, in the original history, the next step would be the Lich King Nazul rebelling and leaving the Burning Legion. In this life, Duque did not dare to guarantee that Nazul would jump out. Moreover, with Nazul's rebellion, there would no longer be a scene of the Dark Ranger Sylvanas angering Arthas and becoming the Forgotten Queen. Duque had no idea how the situation would develop. It was a good thing that the Calamity Army and the Burning Legion were fighting each other, but if they were still in the same boat, they could only fight to the end. Duque did not respect the original work at all. He did not mind promoting further peace between the Alliance and the Horde. He even thought of enticing the Horde to send troops to attack Lordaeron directly. Unknowingly, it was already late at night and the banquet ended. Duque could hold his liquor very well. He didn't even need Vanessa's help. However, when he returned to the bedroom, Duque realized that none of the lights were on. Suddenly, an elegant sound of a harp rang out, like the tinkling of a clear spring in the depths of the mountains. It had a familiar and graceful gentleness, and Duque's heart was on fire. Aurelia, my dear. Just then, the second beautiful sound of a harp rang out, and the song suddenly changed from a solo to a more cheerful ensemble. Windsor? Just as Duke was thinking about what kind of surprise they would give him, the third harp sound rang out. The craftsmanship seemed to be slightly rougher than the first two harps, but after the first few notes, it displayed a wonderful sound of a harp craftsman's level. This is... Just as Duque's face was filled with surprise, an even bigger surprise was yet to come. In the darkness, a row of keys appeared in mid-air. It was not accurate to say that they were keys. They were clearly rectangular pieces of ice. An extremely light ice percussion hammer hit the keys, that had a semicircular cross-section, and suddenly there was a clear and melodious sound like chimes. The next moment, when the small hammer needed the previous note again, another piece of ice keys formed under the hammer. The light and clear sound of the harp mixed with the crisp sound of the percussion, forming a wonderful mini-symphony that gave people an inexplicable sense of joy. Suddenly, 12 beams of light surrounded Duque at the same time, neatly arranged according to the position of a clock. What came into view were 5 extremely charming and beautiful women. The one in the middle was naturally Aurelia. She gently stroked the harp with one hand as she leaned on the chaise longue. The rose-red chair complemented her slender and beautiful figure, but it did not diminish her voluptuous figure. She was only wearing a light veil, but her face was full of dignity, causing Duque to gulp non-stop. On the left, Windsor leaned lightly on the windowsill, her posture graceful and relaxed. Under the moonlight, her thick and fluffy silver hair formed a beautiful combination with her smooth and soft jade-like body. Facing Duque, she responded with a gentle gaze. Just the endless love in her eyes was enough to melt Duque's body and mind. On the upper right, Cervana's 2 long legs hung down from the beam of the roof, swaying lightly, as if he was stirring up circles of water in a peaceful stream. The beautiful curves of her long legs served as a contrast to the great elasticity of her muscles. The wind around her gently made the green leaves flutter up and down around her, forming a sharp contrast with the resplendent crown on her head. A little further to the left was a noble woman who also had a golden crown on her head. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and her intelligent pupils shone with a light that no one could completely understand. As she played, her golden waterfall-like long hair spread out on her long and beautiful swan-like neck, as well as her perky magic peaks. Even though almost all of her attention was on Duque's face, she still did not stop her delicate fingers. Her nimble performance added the nobility and elegance of an old royal family to her beauty. Unknowingly, Alicia had slowly walked behind Duque, her tender fingers caressing Duque's shoulder. Like the most gentle little wife, she helped Duque take off the gorgeous clothes that were only prepared for outsiders. Looking at each and every one of his beautiful female confidantes, Duque suddenly thought maliciously, is this the legendary dog abuse festival? Having any one of them was enough to cause any man in Azeroth to go crazy with jealousy, let alone 5 of them together? It was clearly late at night, but Duque's gaze seemed to have traveled through time and space, seeing the blue and calm ocean in summer, the warm and smooth beach sand, and the happy world filled with the laughter of the birds. Duque opened his arms proudly. Which one is it tonight? Which one? Aurelia had a smile on her lips. Didn't I say it before? I want you to treat each of your sisters equally. I don't mind you bringing me new sisters, but you must first settle all of them. Isn't that right? Duque's expression suddenly changed. He finally knew what this was. Sisters of one heart. Grinding an iron rod into a needle. Chapter 988. Such a beautiful scene. If it were any of the players who had fought alongside him in the game, they would definitely be envious and jealous of Duque to death. In the original history, Elugia, who was bound by fate, wandered around Scalomance with an elegant and pitiful appearance. She led the Silver Coalition to fight against the Scourge, formed the Kirin Tor Expeditionary Force, and finally pulled the Dalajan to the Alliance's side. Aurelia, one of the 5 heroes of the Dark Portal who went missing during the expedition to the Outland, was honored as one of the 5 heroes of the Dark Portal, and had a statue erected in the King's Valley in Stormwind City. Not only was she the heroine of the Alliance, but she was also the leader of the series of fierce battles against the Scourge and Mount Hyjal, but she was also the object of countless men's lust. She once resolutely fought against the Scourge, died in battle, and was resurrected as a banshee, became the Forgotten Queen, and finally fought her way to the throne of the Great Tribe. Among the 5 beauties, getting one was enough for Duque to brag to his friends for the rest of his life. In the end, Duque took all of them. The satisfaction that filled every corner of his soul was something that nothing he did before he transmigrated could compare to. Now, these 5 women actually said that they would work together to deal with him? As the living proof of my outstanding achievements, you actually dare to challenge my position as the head of the family? You are really seeking death. Nothing to say. Draw your sword. Come on. Fight to your heart's content. The moment Duque's godly sword appeared, one sword cold 19 continents. Are you guys scared or not? At this moment, no matter if it was the female ranger hero who had once fought her way through the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, or the noble queen who was as noble as if sitting on the clouds, every delicate and beautiful face revealed a trembling expression. They unconsciously remembered the tragic scene of being beaten by Duque's godly sword, and the humiliation of kneeling and begging for mercy in front of the powerful godly sword. Looking at the aggressive Duque, Aurelia lightly pursed her lips and immediately shouted, "Sisters, what are you afraid of? He is only one person." That's right. There was only one Duque. But Aurelia. Aren't you expressing your guilty conscience by saying this? Don't you know that whenever a guy says something like that in a movie, he's always the first to be killed? I, the Storm Duke Dumok, will kill you 1,000 times. In a group fight there was no other way. First, take care of the leader. The sword chi was like a rainbow, and the spear was like a fierce dragon. Before Aurelia could finish her sentence, she was already knocked down by Duque. The attacks that were as dense as raindrops easily rendered the dignified and elegant big sister speechless. She could only endure the storm bitterly, struggling at death's door. At this time, Duque's ferocity finally aroused the common hatred of the women, and Duque soon fell into a state of siege. Don't worry, watch as I raise my sword and fight in all directions at night. Who was she? Who was she? Gradually, it was no longer important who the enemy was. What was important was that he knew that she was the enemy. You're here to help? Kill. Accidentally caught? Kill. Join forces to attack those who offend my authority? Kill, kill, kill. Anyway, Duque's godly sword never killed nameless people. Since you've encountered my godly sword, surrender and beg for mercy is your only way out. Duque suddenly thanked himself for switching to a priest. What's so good about a priest? A priest has a lot more spiritual attribute points than a mage. What is spiritual? Spiritual is the recovery of magic power. With magic power there is combat power. I Duke am invincible. Wuxia and Jaina begged for mercy after they were defeated, but he did not let them go. The two hugged each other, tears still on their faces. Aurelia was defeated on the chaise longue. Windsor was killed on the windowsill. Cervantes could not escape from the god of war, Duque's pursuit even if he fled to the roof. This battle was simply earth-shattering. Before the sky brightened, Duque dashed out valiantly in a long robe. Duque snapped his fingers. Let me sleep for a few hours. Then, please give me 12 fried eggs and 24 high-level mana potions. Pretentiousness is always with me. Duque's arrogance was so great that it almost scared the two maids to death. After sending the two maids away, Duque fell to the ground with a thud. His last words before he died were, "My harem is not complete yet, I still need to work hard." The next evening, Duque asked Solarian to open a teleportation portal and bring him to the Dalajan ruins to meet Lothar. Duque, you want us to reduce the intensity of our attacks? So that the Calamity Army and the Burning Legion will fight each other and cause internal strife? Anduin, the ultimate goal of eliminating these evils has never changed. But don't you think it's better for us to fight a strong and unified enemy, two evil enemies that have been weakened by each other? Anyway, the main forces of Turalian and Mograine have not withdrawn from Kalimdor. We can't organize a general attack at all. It's better to just slow down. Anduin stroked his chin, which had a lot of white beard. Duque, your idea is indeed good. But are you sure that Lich King Nizul will rebel? I can't be sure, but anyone who was forcibly killed, stripped of their body, left with only their soul, and finally sealed in a small ice skull would feel unhappy, right? From the very beginning, Nizul never really wanted to be loyal to Kill Jaden. Well, you're right. What do you think the probability of Nizul rebelling is? 70%. Duque had wanted to confidently say 100%. But history had changed beyond recognition, and he dared not guarantee it. However, it wasn't Cervantes who was now serving Arthas, but the more ambitious, arrogant, and restless former Sun King Anastrian. Duque felt that it was hilarious. After hearing the 70% probability, Anduin shivered. Although Duque had retired from the front line because of the curse, no one felt that there was anything wrong with Duque. On the contrary, Duque's suggestion was so incisive that Anduin could not find a reason to refute it. Alright, I agree. Yes, how long will you be going this time? I don't know when Nosdorm will send me back after the mission is completed. But for insurance I will arrange everything. Finally, nurture William. I think he's the most suitable helmsman of the next generation. Let him gain experience and let him be the permanent leader of the Alliance in a few years. After hearing Duque's words, Anduin suddenly felt a sense of respect. If not for the fact that they had known each other for many years and knew Duque's temperament, anyone would think that Duque was going to be the second Thoradin the Great after flirting with so many queens and controlling so many kingdoms. Only Anduin, who had gone through all the hardships together, stood his ground against the opinions of the people in the kingdom, and had always been firmly supporting Duque in the Stormwind Kingdom. Chapter 989. Now, Anduin felt that his long-term trust had finally been repaid. Anduin stood up and walked to the balcony of the living room. He faced the sky in the south where his childhood friend had died. It was also where the city of Stormwind was located. In his heart, Anduin shouted, "Lang! Lang, did you see that? We did not trust the wrong person." Although Duque is not a saint, he is definitely the biggest contributor to the rise of Stormwind. When Anduin turned around again, Duque saw the passion and endless gratitude in Anduin's eyes. "Thank you, Duque." Duque smiled and waved his hand. He walked to the balcony and stood next to Anduin. "You're welcome. I also promised Lang that I would work for Stormwind and Azeroth. This was also my promise, but I chose to keep it. It is rare to find someone who can remain sober and calm in the face of power." Anduin's aged face was filled with ecstasy. "Is that so?" Duque was unmoved. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked to the south. "At least there are two of them here, right?" Without another word, two fists, one big and one small, bumped into each other in the air. One old and one young, they looked at each other and smiled. After the undead calamity, the remnants of the old alliance had been swallowed up. Without the two stubborn old men, Tarinas and Antonidas, and without Xeon who had yet to awaken and might become the old Wolf King in the future, and without Anastrian's hindrance, the entire alliance not only had more countries than in history, but also in terms of strength and unity. But with so many countries, the leader of the alliance had to be a human. The human population was large and there were also many countries. The overall strength of the race was stronger, which meant that the alliance could only have humans as its core. Unfortunately, the leaders of the human countries had all sorts of problems. Kalia was just a mascot that Duque had made. Ronan, who was about to take over the Dalajan, was too soft-hearted. Jaina tended to overthink things. As the saying went, even a wise man would make a mistake. Putting aside Gilnis, who had yet to return to the alliance, and Stromgard and Alterac, if Duque didn't seize power, the only one who could be the leader of the alliance was William. It just so happened that Duque himself had been affected by Archimonde's parting gift and turned completely dark, so Duque took advantage of the situation and stepped down. Duque had asked himself more than once, if not for the threat of the Burning Legion, would he want to become the Emperor and become the second Thoradin the Great? The answer was yes. Who wouldn't want to be the Emperor? If you can manage others, why should you be managed by others? Unfortunately, he couldn't be the Emperor. This was not as simple as a hot potato. If the human countries formed an empire, then the alliance would no longer be an alliance. It would become an empire and its allies. Would the other races be willing to become the underlings of the human empire? Duque calculated countless times, but the answer was always negative. Joining an alliance where all the countries and races were equal was not the same thing as subserviently joining a huge empire to become its wings. Even if he controlled the queen, it didn't mean that he had complete control over the country. If the people were dissatisfied, there would be an uprising. When that time came, he could just cry. Moreover, the other races would have deeper doubts. Even if they were forced to join, there would be all sorts of conflicts, let alone sincere cooperation. To have internal strife in front of the Burning Legion was simply courting death. Think about it, if the Alliance didn't have the Night Elves, Draenei, Pandaren, and Werewolves, it would be the end of the Burning Legion when they came to Azeroth. Rather than establishing an empty shell of an empire that would be destroyed in 8 to 10 years, why not pretend to be a saint, gain a good reputation, and be the uncrowned king behind the scenes? Anduin would never know that Duque was so far-sighted, so he only saw Duque as a true knight with pure and great sentiments like himself. After bidding farewell to Anduin and visiting Magni and Jurban, Duque returned to the Wind Lake Villa after leaving more research and development manuals on black technology. After tonight's banquet, tomorrow would be the third day. In the morning, it was the appointed time to work for Nozdormu. After returning to the villa, Duque felt that the gazes around him were weird. The gazes of his knights were always filled with loyalty, admiration, and envy. You know that kind of gaze. Every maid's face was red. They were obviously shy, but they all puffed out their chests and sucked in their bellies. Duque held his forehead, feeling a little annoyed. Just as he entered his study, a voice sounded. To Dear Beast Duke Marcus, Her Majesty Kalia Menethil fervently hopes to attend your banquet tonight. If your excellency wants to unleash his bestial nature, please seize the opportunity tonight. Looking at Vanessa, who stood by the door expressionlessly and with a standard demeanor, like the most loyal maid, who was spitting venomous words at him, Duque felt that his balls were hurting even more. You're dirty? Vanessa. Oh. Are you going to toy with Princess Kalia's pure maiden heart before completely trampling and abandoning it? Alright, I understand. I'll reject Her Majesty Kalia now. Solarian, who was behind him, finally could not help but burst out laughing, while the person involved, Duque, spat out a mouthful of blood. What the hell? Vanessa had really thrown caution to the wind. I really shouldn't have put them together back then. They've already formed a clique. Duque's heart almost softened. However, after the bitter battle last night, Duque knew that he couldn't take it anymore. Duque took a deep breath, took out 2 balls of light and said solemnly, "These are to Her Majesty Alexstrasza's blessing of life. For a woman, it's equivalent to 15 years of youth. I'm going to the River of Time to carry out a mission. If I don't come back, you can use it." Duque had lied. What he had given was obviously Nosdormu's blessing of eternal life, but Vanessa didn't know. Vanessa's expression changed drastically in an instant. She completely lost her venomous tongue, as well as her pride that relied on intimacy to gain favor. Tears streamed down her face. Without even half a second's consideration, she sent back a ball of light. "Master, since the Van Cleef family was sheltered by Master when they were young, and escaped the fate of a violent death, then the Van Cleef family will definitely serve Master for generations to come. It doesn't feel bad to slowly grow old in the Marcus family. As for Her Majesty Kalia's choice, that's Her Majesty Kalia's business." Duque sighed, turned around and went to the dining hall with a slightly heavy heart. When the dining hall's door opened, Duque was surprised to see 3 queens, a marquis and 2 ranger generals sitting neatly in front of the dining table. Duque suddenly turned around, casting a murderous look. Who knew that this bastard maid would actually have the nerve to forcibly turn invisible, and then use swift run to run away? Vanessa. Chapter 990. There's no second time in life. Besides, I'm quite satisfied with my current life. As long as I can let my people, the people I love, and the people who love me live a good life, I'll be satisfied. Giving up my past for the sake of my youth was never an option from the start. Kalia didn't even refuse after feeling touched. As expected, she decisively rejected Duque's gift. That's right. If there's a man I love deeply who chooses to repay my youth in such a way to reject my love, I won't do it either. This is the last restraint of a lady. Of course, if we can be together in the end, and the person I love is willing to give me his youth, then it'll be a different story. The despicable Jaina even added insult to injury. Duque glared at Jaina fiercely. "Damn you, I'll definitely spank your butt later." Jaina secretly stuck out her tongue, then turned her head away, ignoring Duque. Throughout the banquet, Duque felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Although Kalia and the others were reminiscing about the past as if they were talking about family matters, Duque really couldn't lose his temper. Fortunately, the banquet didn't last too long. Kalia threw him a slightly aggrieved look, then very politely left. The rest were all his women. Aurelia very elegantly used a napkin to wipe the non-existent sauce from the corner of her mouth, then sighed. "Duque, we're not forbidding you from adding more sisters to us, we just hope that you can restrain yourself. Then if this is fate's arrangement, then we have no objections." Sylvanas continued, "You'll be going on a mission next year. Are you confident?" 80%, Sasha said. "If you want any of us to accompany you tonight, that's no problem, but please ensure that you have enough stamina for tomorrow." Jaina and Elugia didn't speak, quietly gazing at Duque with eyes full of love. In the end, Duque chose to hug Aurelia to sleep. There was no passion, only the peace of a family. As he softly recounted the bits and pieces of the past, Duque peacefully fell asleep. In the morning, the time to return to the past finally came. Through the portal, the 6 people who were going back this time gathered on a piece of barren land at the junction of the Elven Forest and the Red Ridge Mountain. Duque looked at Grom and Brock, then at Ronan and Vanessa, and finally nodded at Krasus. "Let's begin." Nosdormu's loud voice came from the void. More information began to flood into the minds of the transmigrators from the void. Other than Duque, the other 5 finally understood the meaning of returning to the past, the ancient war. That was the limit of Nosdormu's power. It was the foundation of the world of Azeroth, and even the foundation of the entire world. If the Burning Legion had won the ancient war 10,000 years ago, then the entire timeline would have been completely overturned. That would have been the greatest violation and blasphemy to the efforts of a transmigrator like Duque. The 6 of them felt their surroundings blur, and a terrifying feeling enveloped their bodies. It was as if they were covered by an invisible glass cover, and a large amount of air was instantly pumped into them. The surging waves of air that could not be captured by sight pressed down on everyone's bodies. It was a terrifying feeling that made it hard for them to breathe. The world around them kept changing, and the trees in the elven forest that were already showing signs of winter suddenly grew larger. "Master?" Vanessa cried out in shock, but Duque could not respond at all. Even if he tried to force a smile on his face, it would probably be distorted if Vanessa saw it. In the next moment, they realized that the members of the mission seemed to have become long and narrow noodle people. Before they could even cry out in shock, this strange and distorted illusion of time began to devour everyone. Everyone was like a small boat trapped in a whirlpool in the ocean, spinning clockwise at high speed. The faster they went, the more dizzy they became. Countless strange and blurred sounds and images assaulted their senses. This amount of information was so terrifying, it was no wonder that Nozdormu had to do a will test in advance. It felt like the trees hundreds of meters away were being sucked in by the whirlpool, passing by Duque and entering the whirlpool of time. Soon it was not just ordinary things. Things of all sizes began to fly over, and even the meteors in the sky and the crimson mountains broke apart, whistling past and disappeared in the whirlpool. This mental attack was so violent that the few teammates around Duque quickly lost consciousness. Only Duque remained conscious with the System Elf's high-speed information classification and the protection of the spiritual sea. Duque instantly traveled through space and time, and saw a huge Milky Way, circling in the void. It was a long river of history formed by countless historical fragments. The System Elf greedily absorbed all the information that could be collected at 80% capacity, until Duque was sent to the distant end of the Milky Way by a huge force. In Azeroth, the earth was covered in frost and the bitter cold winter had arrived. Unknowingly he had entered the dark portal for 16 years. Walking in the ruins of Lordaeron, the former Sun King Anastrian looked gloomy. Of course, any lich would look extremely cold and evil to a bystander, regardless of whether they preserved their appearance when they were alive, or if they directly cut off their heads and left only a skull. As the highest-ranking defector who volunteered to join the Calamity Army, the Sun King had always been allowed to retain his will and all his subordinates. Even the corpses of the High Elves that the Calamity Army slaughtered would be assigned to him after they became immortals. Anastrian had obtained the immortality that he wanted more, but he always felt that he had lost more. Yes, it was status. In the past he was a king that no one could command and order. A high and mighty king. After surrendering to the Calamity Army, even if he could retain a large number of subordinates, he still felt that he was a damned slave. Arthas could order him, the Lich King could order him, and even those damned dreadlords could order him around like a dog. In his cold eyes that were burning with blue flames, there was only unwillingness and anger. However, the turning point was coming. Archimonde. A demon commander so powerful that he could destroy the great magic city of Dalagen with just a spell. In the end he died in the world that he came to destroy, and was buried in the hands of those ants that he looked down on. And his death became the catalyst for ambition. What was more interesting was that Anastrian noticed that no one actually informed the dreadlords of the news of Archimonde's death. Chapter 991. The Alliance had stopped their attacks. Most kingdoms of the living did not like to wage war during winter. If the Scourge of Lordaeron belonged to Anastrian, then he would definitely take the opportunity to launch a large-scale invasion during winter, striving to destroy all the living. That way he would be able to occupy the entire eastern and western Plaguelands and cut off the connection between the Alliance and the continent. When Kuel Salis was alone, it would be the time for him to punish the despicable traitor Sylvanas Windrunner who had stolen his kingdom and territory. Unfortunately, it was not time yet. He could only mobilize a pitiful number of undead elves, which numbered less than 100,000. Even though these undead were of high quality, with more than a fifth of them being liches of various ranks, the number of undead elves was still too little. Compared to the Scourge of Tirisfal that numbered nearly 10 million, it was not even worth mentioning. So he waited, like a spider that had weaved a spider's web and hid in a dark corner, waiting for its prey to come to it. Quiet and full of patience. How many months has it been since we last heard from Lord Archimonde? Why is there still no news? Desrock, the leader of the dreadlords in Lordaeron, stomped his hooves impatiently. I'm sick of these rotten zombies. If this goes on, we'll all rot into zombies. The dreadlords stood in what used to be the royal garden of Lordaeron. It was in this palace that Arthas had murdered his own father and brought the apocalypse to his people. That had only happened a few months ago, but it felt like a century had passed. Now the garden that had once been green even in winter was rapidly decaying, just like the zombies and skeletons that were roaming around. Our duty is to manage this place, Desrock, another Dreadlord reminded the leader. Another Dreadlord reminded the leader, then we have to stay here and ensure that the Scourge can attack at any time. Of course I know that, Verimithus. Desrock roared. But no matter how many problems there are, we should have received some orders long ago. The discussion of the Dreadlords was interrupted by a violent sound. It was the sound of a door suddenly falling. The two demon kings turned towards the source of the sound at the same time and opened their bat wings vigilantly, letting out low growls out of habit. Unexpectedly, the one who appeared in front of them was Arthas, a Death Knight who had disappeared for many months and was no longer valued by the demon kings. The humans on the eastern side of the undead barrier claimed that they had sliced Arthas in half at the waist, and it did seem to be the case. After all, the lower half of Arthas' body clearly didn't belong to him in the first place. However, that lower body had already fused perfectly with him. Squeezing the horse's abdomen, Invincible stood up and raised its front hooves. Seeing this, every Dreadlord widened their eyes and stared at Arthas as if they were facing their greatest enemy. The self-proclaimed king of Lordaeron was not wearing a helmet. His white hair fell beside his pale face, and he had a smug smile on his face that the Dreadlord hated the most. This was because a person with this kind of smile usually meant that he was untamed and rebellious. This was not an expression that a servant of a servant should have. Arthas' voice was loud and excited. "Hello everyone, Dreadlords." Faced with such a disrespectful greeting, these greater demons glared at him fiercely. They were obviously suppressing their anger and not letting it explode. "Perhaps I should thank you for taking care of my kingdom while I was away. However, you are no longer of any value to me." The Dreadlords stared at him for a while, dumbfounded. Verimitha was the first to react. He waved his claws and roared, "This is our territory. It's the Burning Legion's Lordaeron. The Calamity Legion belongs to the Burning Legion." Arthas laughed maniacally. Her voice was filled with delight and disdain. "Not anymore, idiotic demons. Archimonde died in battle under the World Tree on Mount Hyjal 4 months ago. The Burning Legion is finished. It'll be perfect once I kill you all." He grinned and raised Frostmourne high. The runes on the blade shone and danced. He did not even need to tighten the reins. With Invincible he charged straight at the 3 Dreadlords. However, Arthas had underestimated the Dreadlords' cunning and ability to escape. Unless it was a place of death like Mount Hyjal that had an evil banishing magic circle set up in advance, the Dreadlords could really run away. "This is not over, you despicable bone scum knight." After letting out a cry of despair, the Dreadlords had no intention of fighting Arthas at all. They immediately teleported away. Their speed was obviously faster than Invincible's movement. Frostmourne only pierced the air and let out a disappointed wail. Arthas was furious, but he quickly regained his cheerful mood. Planet Azeroth's protective circle had been repaired. The demons could not leave and no reinforcements could come in. The Dreadlords were like rootless duckweeds. They would fall sooner or later. The difference was whether they would die by his hand or the alliance that he hated. "We knew you would come back, Prince Arthas." Kel'Thuzad was very excited. Arthas did not even bother to look at his loyal servant. Instead he stared at Anastrian. "I'm glad to see that your body is still strong, Sun King Anastrian," Arthas said sarcastically. "You also knew that I would come back. So, are you ready to lower your humble head?" Anastrian's anger was erupting from the depths of his soul. It swayed wildly, but the soul fire burning in his eye sockets was still calm. "Lowering your head to the strong is the greatest principle in the world." After saying that, he lowered his head. But in his heart, he swore that this would be the last time. No one knew that without a strong enough external influence, the wheel of fate would continue to follow its fixed path and continue to roll forward, crushing all the weak existences. However, when a bearing or part of the wheel disappeared, fate would naturally find a replacement. On this day, Anastrian found the bitter Dreadlord. He subdued the Dreadlord Verimitha and defeated Desrock. Then he launched a counterattack against Arthas, whose strength was greatly reduced due to the Lich King's weakening. He almost caused the next Lich King to fall. In the end, the Sun King still failed. Out of the desire to be independent and the insecurity of the powerful alliance, Anastrian united the undead with strong self-consciousness as the Forgotten Ones. At the same time, he began to rebuild the underground area of Lordaeron. He wanted to rebuild this place into an underground fortress that any army could conquer, the Undercity. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.